video calling, and obviously snaps, being able to send pictures and videos back and forth. And kind of the most recent additions, when we focused a lot on the last year, to your point, is our content business. And that's to the right of the camera. And that's really comprised of stories, live stories, and most recently our Discover service. So we've worked really hard with Discover in particular to introduce an editorial perspective to what was otherwise really the people's perspectives. We had that editorial balance.
And why? What are you aiming for? It's hard to say. You hire this new CNN reporter. You're trying to put together stories yourself. What are you trying to create a new kind of media company, or are you going to do more of that? Create a new service, buy content companies? Any of this?
So hiring folks like Peter or even experimenting with making our own content is really about competency. So we kind of ran into this challenge where we built this stories product which allowed you to tell your personal story, and then we built a live stories product, which means that if you're at a big event and you're taking a snap and you're about to add it to your story, we give you an option to add it to a story that's shared by everyone that's at the event. And that means kind of really cool, you get 10,000 perspectives of an event instead of just 10 from television cameras or something like that. But what happened sort of as that product evolved is that we realized while we were getting thousands of different perspectives from different people, we weren't getting kind of the editorial perspective and kind of what was newsworthy to balance that out. And so we really invested recently in really just trying to understand and get a little better at what it means to be a journalist, what it means to build a platform for journalists. And that's really where we are. We're super early, a couple, 6 months maybe into Discover, and we're still just at a place where we're trying to understand how we can be a great platform for publishers. So there
a lot of places in the world, particularly in Asia, where things started out as messaging services and really become platforms for hundreds of different things you can do. You've begun to do that a little bit with the 3 things you mentioned, and the latest one in particular. Do you see that for this generation and for this time, it's time for a messaging service to evolve that way? And are you that messaging service?
So I think the thing that you're hitting on is that messaging is really the highest frequency behavior on a phone. It makes a lot of sense. But I think that a lot of companies have really worked on saying, okay, I have all these people visiting my service multiple times a day to talk to their friends. What other things can they do while maybe they're waiting for their friend to respond? And that's definitely part of what makes our business more interesting. It means that we can show people content that they might enjoy while they're waiting for their friend to respond. And for us, we've also tried to make it a part of the messaging process where, hey, if you're sending something as a message, maybe you also want to send it to all your friends. You want to broadcast it to all of your friends. And so, yeah, we've really tried to say, this frequency of behavior is new. It surpasses all other behaviors on phones, and so it means we can try to experiment with it.
But you also have Snap Cash. You have these other things. And if you look at something like WeChat, in China, or Line, or any of these things, they just keep adding these things. Are you expecting to keep adding extensions of beyond built-off messaging?
Yeah. So I think focus and simplicity are really important to us. And so I don't know yet, because I think we only want to expand into different products and services that we feel like we can do really, really well. I think you can probably see we don't necessarily care about being the first, but we want to be the first to get it right. And so we really try to take time, rather than just diving into a ton of different services. So while we could drive a lot of distribution to lots of different application services, we want to make sure that we're thoughtful and deliberate with how we do that.
So let's talk about two things. The Discover feature that you're offering to publishers. You were doing a lot of things to be publisher friendly. All kinds of other companies. Facebook is trying to do that. Google presumably is trying to do that. They're not.
I'm in charge of Google's project.
Okay, good. But how do you look at that? What are you doing there? Are you trying to see, because when you're creating your own stories, and then also, do you imagine competing with the publishers or helping the publishers? What are you to them?
My team might hate me for saying this, but we probably don't come anywhere close to any of our partners because we're just not that good at it yet. But when we started out building Discover, we went around and talked to a bunch of people that create media, so publishers and editors and writers, and we talked about what worked for them and what didn't. But the challenge is that was insanely time consuming, and so we realized that if we wanted to make a lot of rapid progress, in order to really walk in a publisher's shoes, we needed to try and do it ourselves. Okay. And so now, rather than traveling to New York or something like that to talk to a lot of these really big publishers, I can go across the street and say hey, what's not working? Right. And we can try and get better faster.
And do you imagine doing more publisher deals like that? And are you trying to help them, or do you feel that they're your constituents or not?
Certainly we are trying to help them. We build a product for them, so, and then obviously for our customers. So in that sense, yeah, we're definitely trying to help.
So there's a blizzard of metrics that social sites and messaging sites put out there. Sometimes it's really hard to parse them. You haven't said a lot about your metrics. How do you measure the frequency with which people use Snapchat, the loyalty, the stickiness of it? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is definitely a challenge for our industry in general, because metrics like monthly active user and daily active user haven't been standardized, and so it can be really hard to compare different businesses in the way they're measuring metrics like that. But more importantly than even the standardization is that they really fail to capture the depth of engagement for a user that's active. So for example, for us, while we're approaching 100 million daily active users in developed markets, the thing that's most exciting, most interesting is that 65% of those daily active users are creating content every day. So that's an indicator of engagement. And I guess the CEO of Vodafone recently said that 75% of the upload traffic in the United Kingdom is Snapchat. so that gives you some sense of the investment that Snapchat are making in our
So how does that, do you have any way to help with context to compare? I'm not asking you to tear down anyone else. I want to make that clear. But just for context, what percent of, Facebook users actually, or Twitter users actually create content, as far as you know?
I have no idea.
You have no.
Okay. But this daily active users is 100 million daily active users you have now.
We're approaching 100 million in developed markets.
Okay, meaning the United States and places like that. And you don't want to use the monthly active users anymore. Why do you think daily active users is what you want to use?
Internally, we even use hourly active.
Okay.
Because people use their phones all the time.
So monthly is just, you think it's much less meaningful.
I think especially with the prevalence of mobile phones and how frequently we all use our phones, that's certainly how we do it in our business.
So let's start with the product, how it's evolving. As you said, it started off as a camera product and it moved to other things. Some people, do you think it's easy to use? Do you think you've reached a level of simplicity? It's certainly easier to use than a lot of other services, but how do you look at what you want to do and what kind of audiences you want to attract to it? Because you want to grow these daily active users or hourly ones.
Well, it's our imperative to always make it easier. And so we're always trying to take things away, like fewer screens, fewer buttons, things like that. That's why it's core to 3 screens. But I think one of the things that we've had to deal with is that the service fundamentally is new, and it doesn't really borrow from the desktop paradigms. And so I think there's a bit of a learning curve, but that's kind of what makes it fun.
What do you want to change? Is there things around it that you want to change?
so many things
push
that
and
change.
Can you give us an example?
You know, gosh, one of the sort of contentious issues that we've been thinking through in our business is really this press and hold mechanic. So in order to view a video on our service, you have to literally put your finger on the screen the whole time. And obviously for us, it's been a huge sign of engagement, right? You have to really be holding your phone and holding your thumb on it. But I think for us, holding us back from longer pieces of content, video, longer videos being viewed on our service, it's just kind of annoying to hold your finger there that long. And I guess the backstory of that too is that the only reason why you have to hold your finger is that because when we first built the service, there was no way to detect screenshots. There was no screenshot API built into the iPhone, and so we kind of had a tricky way of doing it that involved holding your finger on the screen. Now obviously there's a screenshot API, and so I think there's a question internally about, okay, like, can I stop holding the screen all the time?
So can you? Are you going to do that?
I guess that we try not to ruin surprises, but that may be in the cards.
You just said it.
Yeah, I think maybe. You see them, right?
Yeah, sorry.
And they all have Snapchat, so it's like out.
Before you say live streaming, Periscope, we're going to have Dick Khosla talk about and Kayvon talk about it. How do you look at that? Are you developing it? There's rumors that you've been developing a live streaming product. There's rumors you're developing everything pretty much, but that one seems to be right in your wheelhouse. Is that something you want to do, or do you feel their copyright issues are too?
For us, that's something where we're just watching and learning. You know, obviously, Dick and his team, they're paving the way. So we're gonna wait and see what sticks and kind of take it from there. But we're not working on anything right
Are you worried about the copyright issues around it?
now. You know, not really. When we produce live events that we share with our community, we work with the rights holders to produce those.
So your demographic skews quite young, if I'm not mistaken, right? And is that good enough for you? You want to serve that demographic and you can keep adding features. They obviously respond really well because of we can see it in the growth you've had. But there's a lot of other people out there who've been able to migrate to things that started out primarily for college students or younger people, whatever. Does that interest you at all? And if so, what would you do to attract other demographics?
So we're much more interested in increasing engagement. Rather than getting big. So we really focus on a few markets that are really, really important to us, and right now we're working on really increasing engagement, making sure the people that are on our service just love it. And that's really what we watch. And I think over time, we'll think about expanding the product, but right now it's really just a maniacal focus on making great products and deepening the engagement with our service.
So let's talk a little bit about where you're headed next. Where you're headed next. You obviously raised a lot of money. There's all kinds of people interested in Snapchat. You operate away from Silicon Valley. Let's talk about that first. What is it like not being? What is your viewpoint of Silicon Valley? Because you are the company of Los Angeles. You are separate. You're different. I know you have some thoughts about the place and not being there.
It's sort of funny because the business did start there, so I think there's definitely an awareness of Silicon Valley and how transformational obviously it's been. We love LA. Our office is on the beach, and that's pretty nice.
Okay.
And frankly, for us, it's just nice to get a little space from everything going on there, and so we can really focus on our business.
Do you have thoughts about what's going on up there? Do you think it's too frenzied, or do you like it or not like it?
It's absolutely incredible. I mean, it's sometimes overwhelming for me to visit there. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's really exciting, but you kind of enjoy the LA lifestyle.
Can we talk a little bit about the broader landscape of this phenomenal last 10 years of upsurge in services and apps and the whole area of social engagement, which you're in. You just talked about how you really got passionate about that engagement thing. So being social and being engaged are two really important things. And how do you look at the whole landscape of what's out there? You have giant Facebook, which has, I'm sure, also wants people to be, I know they want people to be more engaged, and they also want to grow and they want to try different things, including content. You have Twitter doing some of its own things, and then you have a bunch of other things. How do you look at the whole landscape? I'm not asking you to run down every competitor, but
so for us, when we look at social media, we really look at it on a continuum. And the continuum is from accumulation to instant expression, right? And I think the fascinating thing, I mean, I guess let's just trip down memory lane. 7-10 years ago, you take a bunch of photos with your camera at a party, and you run home, and maybe the next day you plug in your camera and you upload your photos to the internet, and friends can look at them. That's really the accumulation model.
Right.
And the fascinating, exciting thing about our business is that mobile phones have unlocked the ability, to instantly express yourself. And we think that the products, obviously, that we're working on, that the industry's working on, fall somewhere on this continuum. So for us, Snaps really were about the core product, really about instant expression. Stories, shift us a little bit further towards accumulation. And of course, you can always save, a Snap sent on our service, and that kind of puts us sort of in the middle of this accumulation to instant expression continuum, with the default always being instant expression.
So where would you put Twitter and Facebook on that spectrum?
I think Facebook has always really biased itself towards accumulation, and I think Twitter is maybe somewhere more in the middle.
They were pretty instant a few hours ago when the news about our deal came out.
But in terms of, when you talk about accumulation, which sounds like some disease, is that the way of the future? I mean, talk more broadly, because how do you look at Facebook? Because some people can, again, with my kids, they're not on Facebook, they're on Snapchat, and I'm not sure why they're not. Maybe they're not old enough, or they haven't gotten there, but they're not accumulating. They're they're using it a wholly different way, and it's sort of it feels like an anti-Facebook. And again, I don't want to set you up, but they were interested in buying you. You declined apparently. But how do you look at the difference of them between you and Facebook?
Well, I think we can sort of take this back even to like 18 months ago.
Right.
We had sending snaps back and forth. We had barely launched stories. I mean, nobody was using it.
Right.
And since then we've launched chat, we've launched live video and Discover, et cetera. So it's a tough question to ask because our business has really changed rapidly in the past 18 months. But again, I think that it's not really oppositional. It's more philosophical, and it really has to do with where we build products on the continuum. And for us, we want to have the capacity to build products all along that continuum because we think that's important. And that's the choice people make when they express.
Do you imagine that now Kara just said her kids don't use Facebook and they use Snapchat, but do you think is the typical case like Kara's kids, or are there a lot of other people who also use Facebook, also use Twitter, also use something else, but they love Snapchat also?
Well, nice thing is all these products are free, so.
Yeah. For now, for today. But when you look at this idea of what you are, we're talking about ephemeral message. What would you call yourself then if you're talking about it? Because we always do what we call these companies as they evolve. So we called you ephemeral messaging service, Snapchat, the Los Angeles-based ephemeral messaging service. It's really impossible to call you that now, although you are that. You have that as among your attributes. What would you call yourself?
I think we think called entertainment.
Okay.
Entertainment. Interesting.
Yeah. It's fun.
Okay, but nothing. But this is people entertaining each other through various means.
Yeah, I think some of it could be just the snaps themselves.
Yeah, snaps are just entertaining to take a picture and add your little caption and stuff. It's fun.
So let's talk a little bit about you've had some really interesting things to say about the bubble and about the valuations and about the market. I could go over them, but sort of how do you look at this market right now? What's happening? Because a lot of people, it's a constant debate. That, by the way, that black thing outside, that's the bubble when you walk in.
How many people have seen it and thought that's the tech bubble?
That's the tech bubble. How do you look at the whole market right now? Because you're caught up into it.
So I think it's the result of easy money policy, effectively. So when you have near zero interest rates or negative rates in some countries, and governments have printed a lot of money, I think that people are making riskier investments, and I think there will be a correction. It's a question of when. I think everyone sort of has thoughts about that. We don't know when, but it's definitely something that we factor into our plans as we think about the growth of our business.
When do you think that?
If I knew for sure I'd make a lot of money, but it's probably better to skip that.
All right.
Let me ask you about another controversial but super important issue, which has to do with diversity and gender in tech. And this year here at the conference, we're going to be asking this of all our speakers. So we're not singling anyone out, but we'd love to hear what your diversity situation is at Snapchat and what you think it ought to be and what you think about the whole industry and why we are where we are.
Diversity for us is really closely tied to competency. So for us, we have such a diverse group of people using our products and services every day that in order for us to make absolutely great products and services for that community, we need a really, really diverse group of people. And it's really that simple. So for us, we just have an awareness that if we want to make the best products, we need to have a diverse group.
So can you describe your diverse group of people? And I mean, what are some of the percentages, if you have them? And
again, this is sort of the challenge, and I should have exact percentages for you, but we just don't think about diversity in terms of numbers that way. And I think one of the perks of being a really small company is that from the beginning we got to think about diversity, so we didn't end up with a situation where 10 years down the line, oh my gosh, I need to fix my numbers, because it's not really cool to think about people as numbers, right? We think about people in diverse skill sets, and so for us, because we're 300 people now, we're 30 people, a year and a half ago, we've been really mindful that as we grow, we need to hire diverse folks, and so I'm sure we'll have specific numbers to share at some point, but it's been a part of our growth.
And what about the other part of my question, which was, why do you think there is this problem in tech generally, and particularly in the management levels of tech? Is there something special about tech that makes this a particular challenge?
I think diversity is a challenge everywhere.
Right, but in tech in particular.
I think I'm kind of saying that diversity is a challenge everywhere, including tech. And,
so there's nothing different or special about the problem in tech? I mean, that the whole society has the problem in?
There's so many things that feed into diversity and inequality that unpacking them on the stage is probably not the best use of time. But I think I really
do a good use of time.
No, it's really important work. But no, I think that diversity is a challenge for everyone. We need to say that it's a challenge for everyone. I don't think tech has some special thing that makes it harder. I think it just takes hard work to build a diverse group of people to build great products.
Okay.
So let's talk about you, a little bit about you. And actually, before that, we'll get to the products. Again, when you're in the product area you're in, how do you can't go out many years, but music. Are you going to be offering a music product?
Again, we don't make a habit of ruining surprises, but I can talk a little bit. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about music. It's something we love. So I guess people who work in our office will tell you I blast music a lot. But for us, when we look at the music industry today, a lot of the conversation about music is really about business model and distribution. So the transition from a transaction-based model to a subscription-based model, cloud versus download, those are really what I'm hearing about the industry. And I think for us, we always try to apply the product perspective. Like what really do people want from music? What's a great album? Like what makes a great album? And so we're really approaching music from, is there some music product that's better than a track listing? Like there's got to be. And I think that's something that we'd be interested in working on. But it's just not as simple for us as like a distribution plan.
So it's not a subscription service, or when you're saying is there something better? Give me a bigger conceptual idea.
Yeah. So. I guess kind of my point is that everyone thinks of online music today as a track listing. I mean, really, a list of text, that's music today.
Sometimes little pictures.
Tiny picture, like postage stamp. And we're sort of saying, can there be a richer music experience? Probably. I think a lot of people are working on making it better, but we want to focus on actually what is the experience of listening to music beyond how do I get it, which is, I think, a different problem.
And does that play into your whole desire for more engagement?
It's funny you say that because music is actually, I guess, the second highest frequency behavior on mobile phones, listening to music. So that would make sense.
I mean, you're running your whole product on basically a music player, a thing that happens to be a music player, and many other things, but one of the things it is a music.
And when you call what you're doing entertainment, it sounds like you're building a club. I mean, it sounds, you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think of music, you have people chit-chatting, a little dating going on. Do you think of it that way? Like Snapchat's a club, or what is it? I would not be invited into. So.
And are there bouncers?
Right.
We have to be over 13. Okay. We don't think about it as a club. We think about it as a community, really, of people. And we're there to serve that community. That's our job.
So last question on the product thing. Where's mobile going to develop? You have been on the mobile phone. You look. It's where your entire business is. Where do you imagine it going? When you're thinking, okay, my product is going to develop, just the way Facebook got into trouble on the website and they had to move quickly over to mobile. What is something that keeps you up at night when you're thinking of your product? Is it VR? Is it glasses? Is it this watch? Not this, he's got one, but I don't.
Well, I mean, is there a practical way to do it on something like this watch?
So we thought actually a lot about making Snapchat for the watch, and sort of like, why would you want to look at a tiny picture instead of just looking at the bigger picture on your phone? So we ended up waiting to develop something because I think it's going to have to be a totally unique experience. It's not something that exists in our service yet. And we didn't want to just port over some core element of Snapchat to the
I think that's a really smart statement, if you don't mind me saying so.
Right. So when you're doing that, where do you go? Where do you think is going to be the next platform for Snapchat, or is it just the phone?
I think the focus right now for us is just evolving those three businesses, right? So cameras, are there more ways to capture things and express yourself, right? Communication, what are the new ways? Are there new ways to communicate? It's sort of wild to me that the phone still like rings. Like there's just kind of some of these concepts we pulled over from the way we've used phones.
Your issue with ringing is what?
It's kind of annoying.
Okay. So, it was like that before too. So just to be clear.
So instead of ringing, what would it do? Just like give you a shock to the brain, or what? How would you alert me? Now this thing does a different thing, right? It taps you. Some people like it, some people probably don't like it. But is Snapchat going to start?
We haven't totally sorted that out yet, and we want to nail it.
Is lightning going to come out of the phone when there's?
That'd be cool. Yeah.
If you use that, I get a lightning idea.
Yeah, so I think like there's just a lot of these, and for us, like I guess kind of the last piece, the content piece, like the live stories project is like just at the very, very, very beginning, right? And that to us is like super. I'm like obsessed with it. So that is an area for us that's just ripe innovation. So I think for us, it's more again a couple years into the business, three core components of the business. Let's methodically evolve those components rather than trying. We're not really sort of a like what's the new hot thing kind of company.
But I think I heard you say, and please tell me if I'm wrong. Plenty of people do. I think I heard you say that if you can develop something that is rich and unique on here, you'll probably do that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you. Again, we'll get back to you. I know you love talking about you. But when we had lunch the first time, he screamed at me for at least 20 minutes about something I was actually wrong about privacy. It's a big issue for you. And then we started talking about bigger ideas. And one of the things that I think is difficult with you is really to understand how you look at yourself as a manager, as you're growing into a CEO. Every one of these CEOs, whether it's Jobs or Zuckerberg or whoever, has a different journey. How old are you now?
24.
24. Okay. How do you look at yourself? I mean, are you a sole proprietor? Are you someone that likes a team? Are you a Jobsian or whatever? I don't know. Would be a Gatesian?
Jobsian, Gatesian, Zuckerbergian, or are you just some
guy? Yeah.
Some guy.
Probably just some guy. I think
some guysian. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't mean are you like as famous as them or as rich as them. I mean philosophically in the way that you go about your job.
I think the interesting thing, right? You mentioned manager. I'm not a great manager. I try to be a great leader. And for me, that's been going through a process of not like how to be a great CEO, but how to be a great Evan. And that really has been a challenge. I think when I was younger, I grew up with this sort of idea of like what a CEO is.
Which was?
Wear a suit and something like that.
Okay.
But sort of a lot of traditional ideas about what an executive is. And I had, I think, to go through a process where I've been trying to figure out like what makes me a better asset for our team. And I think the key thing there and all that is just trying to grow as quickly as possible. So again, I probably can't say this enough, but we're in a business that is growing really, really quickly and at the same time evolving and changing really, really quickly. And so for me, the mandate is just grow as fast as humanly possible to accommodate the changing environment, and then find absolutely astounding people that are kind of on board to go where we want to go, and really give them the autonomy to build businesses.
What kind of leader are you? How would you characterize, if you weren't describing yourself and you're being honest with yourself? I'm a fascist, for example. But I'm a benevolent fascist, but a fascist nonetheless.
So I think our team would say like that I'm very decisive, but I change my mind a lot, right? Which is sort of a unique combination. But it really means like we care about making decisions really, really quickly, but we care about the flexibility to change your mind, and we want to make sure that is a key component sort of our business. So someone on our team would be like, give him 6 hours.
Then you'll change it. So
when the first time Tim Cook came here, he said that that's what people didn't understand about Jobs, that he would make these big decisions, and it would seem like the end of the argument, and then he'd come in the next morning and flip on it.
Who do you admire? Do you try to pattern yourself after anybody, or not at all?
I really admire Edwin Land, who founded Polaroid, because he sort of had 3 really special gifts, I guess. He was a great scientist. He really cared about science and about experimentation and would work like endless hours experimenting. He cared about art, Polaroid, and kind of worked in service of art. But then also was like a great countryman and humanist, and made decisions based on what he believed the right thing to do was for the right thing to do for humanity. So I'm trying to read kind of as much as I can about him right now.
Okay. Anybody else?
Like my mom. There are a ton of folks in all sorts of industries, really. There's one, we're working on our customer service, right? And like tech companies, I think, are just historically just atrocious at customer service. And so we want to get better at it. And we try to talk to people that are sort of in extreme situations that know a lot about something. And so in this case,
a fireside chat among brothers. This is not unique for us. This is something that we do quite often. It's rare that we have a couple thousand of our closest friends with us. Yeah, and it's also rare that we do it in front of an audience, and we usually actually have a fire. Yes, and bourbon. Yeah. Which we don't have now. But no. So, what we're going to talk about, the things that I'm going to chat with Jeff about, are not the sorts of things perhaps that you would hear in most interviews, because I don't. Two pizza rules is not really my jam. So we're not going to talk about those things. But we do have a shared history. So what I really want to focus on is the influences and the inspirations that have led to some of the things, the foundation of what.
This is a little intimidating. He knows way too much.
It's So, and what I'd like to do is invite all of you to join in on what is some of our greatest hits, I guess, from my point of view. And because we have such a shared history, what I've done, much to Jeff's chagrin, is I've gone through and taken the liberty of pulling together a bunch of family photos. So I'm going to be throwing some of those up behind us, and just so that you guys can sort of understand. So if we start talking shorthand, you'll understand what it is that we're referring to. So all sound good? All right. So and I appreciate your patience. This is not the sort of thing I usually do, so I appreciate your patience. So we're just going to dive right into it. So when we were kids, we would spend every summer on our grandfather's ranch in South Texas. We called our grandfather Pop. That's Pop. There's Pop right there.
We were probably just fixing that windmill.
Yes, always fixing windmills.
Yeah.
Before you were climbing them and smashing bottles upon them, which you did recently in an Instagram video. So one of the things that we would do, every summer, it was really a magical experience. There's little Jeff.
Yeah, that was my maximum cuteness right there. So, by the way, all downhill from there. That's a 1962 International Harvester Scout. We all learned to drive in that car. Once you can drive that car, you can drive anything.
And then this is.
Everybody in this room knows people who fall into these two camps. You're in a meeting, and the person comes in the room. Some people come into the meeting, and they add energy to the meeting. Other people come to the meeting, and the whole meeting just deflates. And those people just, they drain energy from the meeting. And you have to decide which of those kinds of people you're going to be. Are you going to add energy?
And the same thing at home.
And the same thing at home. And so it's a wheel, it's a cycle, it's a flywheel, it's a circle. It's not a balance. Because a balance, that's why that metaphor is so dangerous, because it implies there's a strict trade-off. And you could be out of work, have all the time for your family in the world, but really depressed and demoralized about your work situation, and your family wouldn't want to be anywhere near you. They would wish you would take a vacation from them. And so it's not about the number of hours, not primarily. I suppose if you went crazy with 100 hours a week or something, yeah, maybe there are limits. And I've never had a problem, and I think it's because both sides of my life give me energy. And that's what I would recommend. That's what I do recommend to interns and execs.
So we're out of time. I just want to say that, first of all, thank you all for joining us around the proverbial fire pit. It's not lost on me that I'm incredibly, it brings me joy to have the opportunity to have conversations like this with you often, and I do cherish those opportunities. And this is just one more. So thank you very much. Thank all of you. I guess there's just one more thing to say.
We should toast.
Yep. To Adventure and Fellowship. Elliot, thank you very much. So this gentleman certainly needs no introduction. My name is Mark Bezos, and you're all welcome to call me what my friends do. They usually just refer to me as Jeff's brother.
By the way, just so you know, it actually does go both ways. My brother has a TED Talk about small acts of kindness, being a volunteer firefighter, and it has millions of views. And every once in a while, somebody will stop me and say, "I love your TED Talk about being a firefighter and small acts of kindness." And I usually say, "Well, thank you, but that's really my brother, his TED Talk." But if I'm in a hurry, I just say thank you. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. But if any of you do get confused, I'm the one with the smaller bank account to your left.
He's the big brother.
So, Jeff, before we get started, I think this is obviously a crowd of influential people who are starting out. I think we might as well just make the most of their time. I'm just going to dive right into this, if you don't mind.
Let's go.
You are captain of industry, Amazon.com, private spaceflight with Blue Origin, the Washington Post, levels of fame and wealth that are hard to comprehend. I guess one question that probably is at the top of everyone's mind is, if you had to choose one thing, what would you say is your favorite part of having me as a little brother? Because I take the liberty of writing down some thoughts.
I know the answer to this. And there are many things I love about having Mark as a brother, but what he just did is number one at the top of the list. When I am with my brother, I just laugh continuously because he is the funniest guy in my life.
Well, thank you. You're an easy audience, and I appreciate it.
I am actually an easy audience. That is true.
He is.
I am.
All right, so here's what we're going to do, if all of you don't mind. So. The fact that a fireside chat among brothers, this is not unique for us. This is something that we do quite often. It's rare that we have a couple thousand of our closest friends with us, and it's also rare
that we do it in front of an audience, and we usually actually have a fire.
Yes, and bourbon. Which we don't have now. But no. So, what we're going to talk about, the things that I'm going to chat with Jeff about, are not the sorts of things perhaps that you would hear in most interviews, because I don't, two pizza rules is not really my jam. So we're not going to talk about those things. But we do have a shared history. So what I really want to focus on is the influences and the inspirations that have led to some of the things, the foundation of what.
It's a little intimidating. He knows way too much.
So, and what I'd like to do is invite all of you to join in on what is some of our greatest hits, I guess, from my point of view. And because we have such a shared history, what I've done, much to Jeff's chagrin, is I've gone through and taken the liberty of pulling together a bunch of family photos. So I'm going to be throwing some of those up behind us, and just so that you guys can sort of understand. So if we start talking shorthand, you'll understand what it is that we're referring to. So all sound good? All right. So and I appreciate your patience. This is not the sort of thing I usually do, so I appreciate your patience. So we're just going to dive right into it. So when we were kids, we would spend every summer on our grandfather's ranch in South Texas. We called our grandfather Pop.
That's Pop.
There's Pop right there.
We were probably just fixing that windmill.
Yes, always fixing windmills.
Yeah.
Before you were climbing them and smashing bottles upon them, which you did recently in an Instagram video. So one of the things that we would do, every summer, it was really a magical experience. There's little Jeff.
Yeah, that was my maximum cuteness right there. By the way, all downhill from there. That's a 1962 International Harvester Scout. We all learned to drive in that car. Once you can drive that car, you can drive anything.
And then this is, so there's the two of us. That is Jeff teaching me how to open or close a gate, which doesn't seem like it would be that complicated, but I was having trouble.
Wire gap gates are tough.
And then this is...
that's red. Well, that's Christina.
That's our sister Christina.
But the horse, that's red. Yeah.
So I guess one of the things that we learned every summer, this is Pop again. So there was, as we alluded to with the windmills, there was always work to be done on the ranch. One of the things that I think we learned to value, and you've spoken about this in the past, is the role that resourcefulness, self-reliance plays. Sure. Certainly on a place like the ranch. But can you talk a little bit about?
Well, so one of the great things that you learn, and first of all, we had a very fortunate, lucky childhood. We got to spend a lot of time with Pop and our grandparents, and you learn different things from grandparents than you learn from parents. It's just a very different relationship. I spent all my summers on his ranch from age 4 to 16, and he was incredibly self-reliant. If you're in the middle of nowhere in a rural area, you don't pick up the phone and call somebody when something breaks. You figure out how to fix it yourself. And so as a kid, I got to see him solve all these problems and be a real problem solver. He even did his own veterinary work. He would make his own needles for the suture up the cattle with. He would take a piece of wire, use a blowtorch to heat it up, pound it flat, sharpen it, drill a hole through it, make a needle. And some of the cattle even survived. And so we learned a lot of things from watching him because he would take on major projects that he didn't really know how to do, and then figure out how to do them.
A good example of that is you guys built a house.
Yeah.
I think he bought this out of a Sears catalog.
It was a kit house, and we built that thing. Somebody came out. It all showed up in big boxes, and a professional came out and poured the foundation, and then we did the rest of it. But I'm pretty sure that was quite a project. You can see some of the cows there that didn't survive the procedure.
So when I was going through these, it certainly I came across this photo, which I'm not exactly sure what it was you were doing here. But I'm almost positive
it looks
you're
like
doing it wrong.
Maybe that vent really pissed me off. I don't know. That's really
well. I think there's a couple things here. First of all, OSHA would not be pleased with the way you're on that ladder, and it appears as though you're crafting a spear.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. So I think that. if you can talk a little bit, I know that there's this bulldozer in the background.
That's a
the funny part
D6 Caterpillar bulldozer.
Run and see. What do you think about that?
Well, I think one can't depend on other countries for immigration. And in fact, if you look at, say, the population worldwide, and this is almost everywhere in the world, and it seems to be a function of how once a country industrializes, once a country urbanizes, the population immediately starts to decline. So one could say, for example, like China could not possibly solve its population with immigration, because if China is currently tracking to be maybe lose 40% of its population every generation. That would be 700 million, 800 million people. Or roughly 600 million people. It's a lot, basically. You'd have to have the entire United States immigrate there twice every generation to simply maintain numbers, just for China. So immigration, there are simply not enough numbers in immigration. And I think there is value to a culture. And we don't want cultures. We don't want Japan to disappear. We don't want Italy as a culture to disappear. We don't want France as a culture to disappear. I think we have to have maintain the sort of reasonable cultural identity of the various countries, or they simply will not be those.
We can finish with this.
Oh, and so it's worth reading about the Fermi paradox, and because people have thought very hard about this, because one of the things is like, well, maybe there are these great filters, and these civilizations don't pass these filters. One of the filters is, do we become a multi-planet species or not? If we do not become a multi-planet species, then eventually, at some point, something will happen to the planet. Either it will be man-made, or it will be something natural, like a meteor, like whatever killed the dinosaurs, for example. So, and then eventually the sun will actually expand and will destroy all life on Earth. So if one cares about life on Earth at all, we should care about becoming a multi-planet species and eventually going out there and becoming a multi-stellar species and having many star systems. We want the exciting parts of science fiction to not be fiction forever. We want to make them real. And yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Elon. Well, how long is the trip from Austin to here, by the way?
I think it's about 8 or 9 hours.
Okay, so you're fresh like in the first morning.
Yeah, exactly.
So first question is about demography, and I spoke with you in the past about that, and I think it's very important for you, and you pointed on that a lot of your discussion and your purpose. Is it?
Yeah, I think I really want to emphasize that it's important to have children and to create the new generation. And as simple as it sounds, if people do not have children, there is no new generation. So I very, very much strongly recommend that. I'm very much in favor of humanity expanding and creating a bright and exciting future for the world. And but fundamental to the furtherance of human civilization is having humans. As simple and basic as that sounds. Every year I look at the birth rates, and I'm like, it's kind of a bit depressing, because birth rates seem to decline every year. And I think that's my biggest advice to leaders, to government leaders, and to the people in general would be to make sure to have children to create the new generation. And I think any incentives that can be done to incent a new generation, to make it easier for women to have children, and to support the children, I think would be very wise. This is so fundamental, and I really can't emphasize that enough. If you don't have a new generation, there is no new generation. Or with current birth rates, I think maybe the generations are birth rates maybe half of the replacement rate. And what that means is, in 3 generations, the population will be roughly 1/10 of its current size. In 3 generations, maybe 4 generations, the population will be 1/10 of its current size. So I always want to emphasize this point, because it is so basic and fundamental that if there's not at least a birth rate which is keeping population constant, then people will disappear.
Disappear, Mr. Musk, disappear.
Disappear.
We have a lot of immigration. Somebody says that immigration is important for that reason. What's your point on that? Immigration is coming in Europe, and it's coming in America from the south of America, and then Europe from the south of the Mediterranean Sea. What do you think about that?
Well, I think one can't depend on other countries for immigration. And in fact, if you look at, say, the population worldwide, and this is almost everywhere in the world, and it seems to be a function of how once a country industrializes, once a country urbanizes, the population immediately starts to decline. So one could say, for example, like China could not possibly solve its population with immigration, because if China is currently tracking to be maybe lose 40% of its population every generation. That would be 700 million, 800 million.
Caterpillar bulldozer that my grandfather bought used for $5,000, which is an enormous bargain. This thing, it should cost way more than that. The reason it was so cheap is it was completely broken. The transmission was stripped, the hydraulics didn't work. And so we spent basically a whole summer repairing it, and big giant gears would arrive by mail. And you could be out of work, have all the time for your family in the world, but really depressed and demoralized about your work situation, and your family wouldn't want to be anywhere near you. They would wish you would take a vacation from them. And so it's not about the number of hours, not primarily. I suppose if you went crazy with 100 hours a week or something, yeah, maybe there are limits. And I've never had a problem, and I think it's because both sides of my life give me energy. And that's what I would recommend. That's what I do recommend to interns and execs.
So we're out of time. I just want to say that, first of all, thank you all for joining us around the proverbial fire pit. It's not lost on me that I'm incredibly, it brings me joy to have the opportunity to have conversations like this with you often, and I do cherish those opportunities. And this is just one more. So thank you very much. Thank all of you. I guess there's just one more thing to say.
We should toast.
Yep. To Adventure and
Fellowship.
Elliot, thank you very much. So this gentleman certainly needs no introduction. My name is Mark Bezos, and you're all welcome to call me what my friends do. They usually just refer to me as Jeff's brother. So,
By the way, just so you know, it actually does go both ways. My brother has a TED Talk about small acts of kindness, being a volunteer firefighter, and it has millions of views. And every once in a while, somebody will stop me and say, "I love your TED Talk about being a firefighter and small acts of kindness." And I usually say, "Well, thank you," but that's really my brother, his TED Talk. But if I'm in a hurry, I just say thank you. So thank you.
yes, absolutely. But if any of you do get confused, I'm the one with the smaller bank account to your left.
He's the big brother.
So, Jeff, before we get started, I think this is obviously a crowd of influential people who are starting out. I think we might as well just make the most of their time. I'm just going to dive right into this, if you don't mind.
Let's go.
You are captain of industry, Amazon.com, private spaceflight with Blue Origin, the Washington Post, levels of fame and wealth that are hard to comprehend. I guess one question that probably is at the top of everyone's mind is, if you had to choose one thing, what would you say is your favorite part of having me as a little brother? Because I take the liberty of writing down some thoughts.
I know
with
the answer to this. And there are many things I love about having Mark as a brother, but what he just did is number one at the top of the list. When I am with my brother, I just laugh continuously because he is the funniest guy in my life.
Well, thank you. You're an easy audience, and I appreciate it.
I am actually an easy audience. That is true.
He is.
I am.
All right, so here's what we're going to do, if all of you don't mind. So. The fact that a fireside chat among brothers, this is not unique for us. This is something that we do quite often. It's rare that we have a couple thousand of our closest friends with us, and it's also
we're
rare that
do it in front of an audience, and we usually actually have a fire.
Yes, and bourbon. Which we don't have now. But no. So, and what we're going to talk about, the things that I'm going to chat with Jeff about, are not the sorts of things perhaps that you would hear in most interviews, because I don't, two pizza rules is not really my jam. So we're not going to talk about those things. But we do have a shared history. So what I really want to focus on is the influences and the inspirations that have led to some of the things, the foundation of what.
It's a little intimidating. He knows way too much. It's
So what I'd like to do is invite all of you to join in on what is some of our greatest hits, I guess, from my point of view. And because we have such a shared history, what I've done, much to Jeff's chagrin, is I've gone through and taken the liberty of pulling together a bunch of family photos. So I'm going to be throwing some of those up behind us, and just so that you guys can sort of understand. So if we start talking shorthand, you'll understand what it is that we're referring to. So all sound good? All right. So and I appreciate your patience. This is not the sort of thing I usually do, so I appreciate your patience. So we're just going to dive right into it. So when we were kids, we would spend every summer on our grandfather's ranch in South Texas. We called our grandfather Pop.
That's Pop.
There's Pop right there.
We were probably just fixing that windmill.
Yes, always fixing windmills.
Yeah.
Before you were climbing them and smashing bottles upon them, which you did recently in an Instagram video. So one of the things that we would do every summer, it was really a magical experience. There's little Jeff.
Yeah, that was my maximum cuteness right there. So, by the way, all downhill from there. That's a 1962 International Harvester Scout. We all learned to drive in that car. Once you can drive that car, you can drive anything.
And then this is, so there's the two of us. That is Jeff teaching me how to open or close a gate, which doesn't seem like it would be that complicated, but I was having trouble.
Wire gap gates are tough.
And then this is...
that's red. Well, that's Christina.
That's Sister Christina.
But the horse, that's red. Yeah.
So I guess one of the things that we learned every summer, this is Pop again. So there was, as we alluded to with the windmills, there was always work to be done on the ranch. And one of the things that I think we learned to value, and you've spoken about this in the past, is the role that resourcefulness, self-reliance plays. Sure. It's certainly on a place like the ranch. But can you talk a little bit about?
Well, so one of the great things that you learn, and first of all, we had a very fortunate, lucky childhood. We got to spend a lot of time with Pop and our grandparents, and you learn different things from grandparents than you learn from parents. It's just a very different relationship. I spent all my summers on his ranch from age 4 to 16, and he was incredibly self-reliant. If you're in the middle of nowhere in a rural area, you don't pick up the phone and call somebody when something breaks. You figure out how to fix it yourself. And so as a kid, I got to see him solve all these problems and be a real problem solver. He even did his own veterinary work. He would make his own needles for to suture up the cattle with. He would take a piece of wire, use a blowtorch to heat it up, pound it flat, sharpen it, drill a hole through it, make a needle. And some of the cattle even survived. And so we learned a lot of things from watching him because he would take on major projects that he didn't really know how to do, and then figure out how to do them.
A good example of that is you guys built a house.
Yeah.
I think he bought this out of a Sears catalog.
It was a kit house, and we built that thing. Somebody came out. It all showed up in big boxes, and a professional came out and poured the foundation, and then we did the rest of it. But I'm pretty sure that was quite a project. You can see some of the cows there that didn't survive the procedure.
So when I was going through these, it certainly I came across this photo, which I'm not exactly sure what it was you were doing here. But I'm almost positive
like maybe that vent really pissed me off. I don't know. That's really.
Well, I think there's a couple things here. First of all, OSHA would not be pleased with the way you're on that ladder, and it appears as though you're crafting a spear.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. So I think that. If you can talk a little bit, I know that there's this bulldozer in the background.
That's a D6 Caterpillar bulldozer that my grandfather bought used for $5,000, which is an enormous bargain. These things should cost way more than that. The reason it was so cheap is it was completely broken. The transmission was stripped, the hydraulics didn't work, and so we spent basically a whole summer repairing it. And big giant gears would arrive by mail order from Caterpillar, and we couldn't even move the gear. So the first thing my grandfather did was build a crane to move the gear. So that's that kind of self-reliance and resourcefulness.
And there's also there's a story that is somewhat legendary in our family. One of the things that Pop did one summer. It's a little out of character.
Oh, I know what story you're talking about. So he really actually was a very careful, conservative sort of person, not prone to crazy acts or anything. Kind of introspective and even an introverted, quiet person. But one day he was all by himself. He had driven to the ranch, and he was at the main gate to the ranch, and he forgot to put the car in park. And so when he got to the gate, he noticed that the car was slowly rolling downhill toward the gate. He thought, "This is fantastic. I have just enough time to unlatch the gate, throw the gate open. The car is going to drive right through, and this will be wonderful." He almost got the gate unlatched when the car hit the gate, and it caught his thumb between the gate and the fence post, and it stripped all the flesh off of his thumb. It was hanging there by a tiny little thread, and he was so angry at himself that he ripped that piece of flesh off and threw it in the brush, got back in the car, drove himself to the emergency room in Dilley, Texas, 16 miles away. And when he got there, they said, "This is great, we can reattach that. Where is it?" And he said, "Oh, I threw it in the brush." They drove back with the nurses and everybody, and they looked for hours for the thumb, and they never found that piece of flesh, something probably eaten it. So they take him back to the emergency room, and they said, "Look, you have two choices. You're going to have a skin graft for that, and we can sew your thumb to your stomach and leave it there for 6 weeks. That's the best way to do it. Or we can just cut a piece of skin graft from your butt and just suture it on, and it won't ever be as good, but the advantage is your thumb won't be sewn to your stomach for 6 weeks." And he said, "I'll take option 2, just do the skin graft from my butt." And he did that. It was very successful. It worked fine. But the funniest thing about this story is that I have incredibly vivid memories, and we all do, of him. Definitely his mornings were completely ritualized. He would wake up, eat breakfast cereal, read the newspaper, and shave with an electric razor for a really long time. Like, he would shave with that electric razor for like 15 minutes, and while he's eating cereal. And when he was done shaving his face with that razor, then he would take 2 quick passes over his thumb, because his thumb grew butt hair. Which, by the way, did not bother him at all.
No. He was completely unfazed by it.
Unfazed.
So, thumb, butt hair aside, the value of resourcefulness, right, and self-reliance. How do you apply that to the work that you do on a daily basis? How do you?
Well, I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs and people pursuing dreams and passions in this kind. You always the whole point of moving things forward is you run into problems, you run into failures, things don't work. You have to back up and try again. Each one of those times when you have a setback and you back up and you try again, you're using resourcefulness, you're using self-reliance, you're trying to invent your way out of a box. And we have tons of examples at Amazon where we've had to do this. We failed so many times. I always think of us as a great place to fail because we're good at it. We have so much practice. And just to give you one example, many years ago now, we wanted a third-party selling business because we knew we could add selection to the store that way. And we started Amazon auctions. Nobody came. I think maybe our mother was the only one who purchased something.
I bought a coffee cup.
You bought a coffee cup? Okay, so there were 2 purchasers. And that's then we said, well, we opened this thing called Z Shops, which was like fixed price auctions. Again, nobody came.
I didn't use that.
And then finally, and each one of these failures is like a year and a half long. And so we're trying to invent new things. And we finally came across this idea of putting the third-party selection on the same detail pages, the same product detail pages that we had our own inventory on, our own retail inventory on. We called this marketplace, and it started working right away. And so that resourcefulness of trying new things, figuring things out, what the customers really want, it pays off in everything. It pays off even in your daily lives. How do you help your children? What's the right thing? My wife has a great saying. We let our kids use, even now they're 17 through 12, but even when they were 4, we would let them use sharp knives, and by the time they were, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8, we let them use certain power tools. And my wife, much to her credit, she has this great saying. She says, "I would much rather have a kid with 9 fingers than a resourceless kid," and which I just think is a fantastic attitude about life.
Luckily, you have resourceful kids with 10 fingers each.
Yeah, so far they have all their fingers.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that resourcefulness is so important. You actually, it was a prerequisite for the selection of a spouse, right? So this is.
Yeah, I did in my 20s. This is way pre-Tinder, pre-Match.com, and so I had this. At a certain point, I decided I wanted to get married, and I had all my friends setting me up, and I had my list of criteria. And this was like good old-fashioned blind dates. I went on dozens of blind dates, and it turned out I kept meeting people who were professional blind daters, and I sort of became a professional blind dater. And so we would sit down, and most of the conversation was quickly about how we're not right for each other, but how do you meet people? And it was actually turning into a very. But when I was telling my friends my criteria, one of the ones that I would list was that I wanted a woman who could get me out of a third world prison. And my friends were like, "What are your future plans?" Like what? And I said, "No, it's just a visualization for somebody really resourceful, because I think that you don't want to go through life with teammates who aren't resourceful, and so you do want to go through life with people who, if you need, could get you out of a third world prison." Hypothetically speaking.
Yeah. So so this is a picture.
That's a recent photo.
Yeah, that was last summer, I think.
Yeah.
We were on a family vacation, and so this one jumped out at me because you're doing McKinsey curls there with your wife, and you're looking a little buff, and so that of course made me think of this. Now, as internet memes go, Swole Jeff is pretty cool, right? So. Swole Mark raced across the internet, I'd be pretty psyched. But, this got sent to me by so many people, variations of this, right? "Oh my God, your brother looks awesome, your brother looks awesome." I know. And then, but it confused me because, in all honesty, this is what I grew up with.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, right? So, when you guys saw Swole Jeff, I was like, I was surprised too, right? I mean, this is.
Yeah, sexy, right? I remember that. I am.
How old are you?
Halloween costume. I am one of. I had some friends, and we went as the food.
Oh, no, wait. There you go.
There we go. That is. Yeah. The
lady killers.
Chicks love that. They love that. We were very successful in high school.
So as fitness goes, and then there was this guy who's like late 90s Jeff, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And your eating habits at this point in your life were not great.
No, this is you won't even believe this story. You're just gonna have to believe me that I tell you this is true. When my wife and I got married, I had been eating a whole can for a couple of years. I had been eating for breakfast every morning a whole can of Pillsbury biscuits. So I would wake up in the morning, I would preheat the oven to 375, I would get out the baking sheet, I would crack open the Pillsbury biscuits, place them on there, and with butter, and I would eat the whole can. And I was skinny as a rail, and it was just, after watching me, so then we get married, and she watched me do this every morning as my spouse for like 3 months. And then she finally stopped me one day, and she said, "Do you know what's in that?" And I was like, honestly, that wasn't even a concept for me, that there was something in food. That there was like I had never read a nutrition label in my life. I ate what tasted good to me. And so she kind of showed me the ingredients label, and we had a little very rudimentary discussion about nutrition, and I stopped eating the biscuits.
Well, I'm frankly very happy and somewhat surprised you survived all of that. We're glad you're still with us.
So she was incredulous. I couldn't believe it.
So one of the things I want to talk about, a question that we've talked about before, you were 30 years old in 1994 when you decided to start Amazon.com. You had a great job. I remember you had a great apartment on the Upper West Side.
You've been married for a year.
You've been married for a year.
I had not been eating biscuits for 9 months.
I'm just, how did you go through making the decision to drop what was a very good job and take this chance? It all seems very obvious now, right? This many years later that it paid off, but at the time it was not obvious.
No, it wasn't. And I did do a lot of soul searching. I went to my boss at the time, and I really liked my job. And I told my boss I was going to go do this thing, start an internet bookstore, and my wife, I'd already told my wife, and she's like, great, let's go. And I said to my boss, he's like, this is a good idea. So I think this is a good idea, but it would be an even better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. And that sort of made some logical sense to me, and he convinced me to think about it for a couple of days. So I went away, and I was really trying to get my head around how to think about this. And I think, for me, the right way to make that kind of very personal decision, because those decisions are personal, they're not like data-driven business decisions. They are, what does your heart say? And for me, the best way to think about it was to project myself forward to age 80 and say, look, when I'm 80 years old, I want to have minimized the number of regrets that I have. I don't want to be 80 years old in a quiet moment of reflection, thinking back over my life and cataloging a bunch of major regrets. And I think that regrets, our biggest regrets, in most cases, you can murder somebody, okay, you regret that, but in most cases, our biggest regrets turn out to be acts of omission. It's paths not taken, and they haunt us. We wonder what would have happened. I loved that person, and I never told them. And then they married somebody else. I didn't do this, and so that's the frame of mind that I put myself in. And once I did that, once I thought about it that way, it was immediately obvious to me. I knew that when I'm 80, I would never regret trying this thing that I was super excited about and it failing. If it failed, fine. I would be very proud of the fact when I'm 80 that I tried. And I also knew that it would always haunt me if I didn't try. And so that would be a regret. It would be a 100% chance of a regret if I didn't try, and basically a 0% chance of regret if I tried and failed. So I think that's a useful metric for any important life decision.
And this is, our sister took this photo, and she was, I don't quite know why she thought this was a moment. It's okay, this is you at McKinsey.
Yeah, we're about to take off driving across the country to start Amazon, go to Seattle.
And that's
my yellow lab, Kamala, named after a Star Trek character.
We're so happy to have these family photos, but we can't for the life of us figure out why Christina bothered to take them, but we're so glad she did. And then, she also was smart enough to tell you to leave the dog.
Yeah, she saved us probably because we were going to drive across the country with the dog, which was probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
So she said, why don't I keep the dog, and after you guys get settled, I'll send you the dog.
So a question I have is, we just talked about the fact that, there was certainly no guarantee that Amazon was going to work.
No, there never is any kind of startup.
I think, what would Jeff Bezos be doing if this hadn't worked out?
I think it's a good question. Nobody ever really knows what twists and turns life takes. My best guess is I would be a very happy software engineer.
Yeah. And working on anything in particular?
Well, today I might be, I don't know, I'm very, very curious about machine learning and artificial intelligence, and at Amazon we're doing a lot of that. Probably I would be attracted to that field today.
And if I thought of this question, I'm not sure exactly how you would answer it, but I am curious to know, like your fantasy job, not the one that would pay the bills.
Well, that I have, and you know what it is.
I think
he knows.
My guess is bartender.
Yeah, and I do have. By the way, I'm really glad I'm wearing my Honey Badger Don't Care T-shirt there. And thank you for that photo because it looks like I've had about 4 of those.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Looks like a Bloody Mary. That's where they start.
What are brothers for?
That's where they start.
But yeah, I have this.
You make a mean cocktail.
I do. I pride myself on my craft cocktails, and I do have this fantasy that I want to be a bartender. And I know that it is a fantasy. Like if I were actually a bartender, probably like I've glamorized the job in my mind. I know that. But I love people. I like talking to people. I love making cocktails.
You're not very fast.
I'm super slow. It would have to be a craft cocktail bar. We'd have to charge a lot per drink, and there'd be a big sign behind the bar that says you can have it good or you can have it fast, which is what that kind of thing. But yeah, I have a kind of fantasy there.
So if we could shift gears a little bit, I want to talk about Blue Origin.
Yeah.
So Blue Origin is your private commercial spaceflight company, and we'll talk in a minute about all the work that you're doing in that regard. But I guess what I want to focus on for a minute or two is the inspiration for that, the passion behind it. So. I'm going to put up a photo now. This one's really more embarrassing for me than for you. But so here we are.
This is like you're about to block a soccer kick or something.
I'm auditioning for Elon.
And that's on the far right there is our dad.
That's Chico and the man over there on the right.
He's Cuban, and it's a kind of, it's one of those tricks that the universe plays on you that my mom's name is Jackie and my name is Jeff, and there's no J in Spanish. And so he still has to call her Yaki and me Yef. And, but he sounds exactly like Ricky Ricardo. He's a delightful guy. But yeah, that's the whole crew there.
That's the whole crew there. So you were the valedictorian of your high school in Miami and had the opportunity to give a speech at your graduation. And I think the vast majority of your speech was about colonizing space.
I think all of it.
I think all of it as well. Right.
So
and I still remember your closing line. I mean, even then, it stood out to me. And it was, do you remember it?
I do. I remember the close. It was something like space, the final frontier, meet me there.
That was it.
That was, yeah. So, and I've been passionate about space, rockets, and rocket engines since I was a 5-year-old boy.
And so, I want to talk about that a little bit because, we've talked about, certainly the story you've told about having seen the moon landing in 1969, right? So this is Pop again.
That's Christina,
That's our sister on the floor. So this was a very familiar setting for us. Anytime Pop was watching TV, he was laying on the, he had perfectly good furniture. I could see it, but
he laid on the floor.
Laid on the floor to watch television. And you remember seeing exactly like this when you were watching the lunar landing.
Yeah. No, that was his posture. Yeah, and I do think you never know exactly. You don't choose your passions choose you. How they're formed, you're never completely sure. But I do think you get imprinted somehow early on with certain things. You just get excited about them, and because you're excited, you pay more attention, and they grow. And that's space is like that for me. I watched Neil Armstrong step onto the moon when I was 5.
And I do wonder. I know that Pop was a big fan of the Watergate trials. Also watched those in the
I
same
watched
setting.
Just like this. He was kind of a news junkie anyway. He obsessively watched the Watergate hearings.
Do you think at some level that might have influenced you?
At least by the Post.
Yeah,
it's hard to know. I bought the Post because I think it's an important institution, and I told the team at the time, like, the Post at the time was kind of financially upside down, had a lot of work to do, no fault of their own. The internet had really taken the wind out of newspaper companies. And I said, look, I would not buy a financially upside down salty snack food company. But the Post is a real institution I think matters and needs some runway. So that's why I did it. I happen to know the guy who had owned it for so many years, Don Graham, who's just an amazing person. And so that all worked out. But did watching the Watergate hearings with Pop on the carpet have influence on that? Probably.
Right, at some level. So going back to Blue Origin, I mean, space has been such a
My
a
God.
big part of your life for so long, and certainly every memory.
That's in Houston. We lived in Houston.
That was a
for
park
many
not
years.
too far from our house. I think that it's science fiction movies, books. My passion for that stuff certainly came from watching you enjoy it so much. But I look at this picture and I thought to myself, I've seen that face recently, and this. So this is you're standing on the landing pad in West Texas, the launch and landing site in West Texas, where you're launching and landing the New Shepard vehicle for Blue Origin. So if you could just take a minute or two and sort of help us understand, what is Blue Origin up to?
Well, Blue Origin the vision for Blue Origin is millions of people living and working in space. And the key thing is we have to dramatically reduce the cost of access to space. Right now, space travel is very expensive. And the reason it's expensive is not hard to understand. It's because we throw the hardware away after each use. And so we need reusable rocket vehicles. And that's what Blue Origin is working on. We're working on making sure that we don't have to throw the plane away every time after you fly to your vacation destination. That would definitely increase the cost of your vacation. And so that's what we need to do. And we can do it. It's totally possible. And I think it's important.
Yeah, this is what the booster looks like when it's coming back down.
Yeah.
This is again coming back.
My
down.
cowboy hat still has champagne stains.
That's right. Your hat still has
the best kind
champagne.
of stains.
So I guess if we could talk. This is one of my favorite shots. This is the booster in
And that's West Texas. It's a beautiful country.
So if you could just talk a little bit about you've been passionate about space your whole life, but this is not just a plaything for you.
No,
the work that
no.
Blue Origin is doing is not a nice thing. I mean, actually, this is important work.
My view is that it's incredibly important work that needs to be done and done as quickly as possible. And I have my own reasons why I believe that. They can be explained pretty simply. And it's not for me. It's not the. There's a very kind of common argument that's been around for a long time, actually kind of first popularized by Arthur C. Clarke, who said all civilizations become spacefaring or extinct. And this is the kind of Plan B argument that when Earth is destroyed somehow, we better make sure that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket. And I hate the Plan B argument. I think Plan B with respect to Earth being destroyed is make sure Plan A works. So we have sent robotic probes to every planet in this solar system. Believe me, this is the best one. We know that. It's not even close. My friends who say they want to move to Mars or something, I say, why don't you go live in Antarctica for a year first? Because it's a garden paradise compared to Mars. And so we really, this planet is so amazing. It's a jewel in our solar system. And we have, if you take baseline energy usage on Earth and just compound it at a few % a year for just a few hundred years, you have to cover the entire Earth's surface in solar cells. So that's not going to happen. So we have two choices. We either go out into space or we switch over to a civilization of stasis. And personally, I do not like the idea of stasis. We have, our grandchildren and their grandchildren will live in a much better world if they can continue to advance and develop and use more energy and all of the things that we've enjoyed for hundreds of years as a civilization of Earth. I don't even really believe in stasis. I think things are either growing or shrinking. I think stasis is highly unusual and in real life doesn't exist. I don't even think liberty is consistent with the idea of stasis. I mean, if you get real stasis, somebody's going to have to tell you how many kids you can have, how much energy you can use. There'll be all kinds of things that just aren't consistent with liberty and freedom. So, but in space, we have, for all practical purposes, unlimited resources. We could have 1 trillion humans in the solar system and still wouldn't be crowded. And so then if you had 1 trillion humans, you'd have 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Mozarts and 1,000 Da Vincis. And how cool would that be? But we have to go to space. And we have to go to space to save Earth. That's why this work is so important. And we don't have forever to do it. We've now gotten so big as a civilization on Earth that we kind of have to hurry. And so I believe that, that really in the kind of a long time frame, the most important work I'm doing is Blue Origin and pushing forward to get humanity established in the solar system.
So, and what sort of time frame are we talking about?
Well, the grand vision, 1 trillion humans in the solar system and so on, that's hundreds of years. But we can have, in just a couple of decades, I think we can have much lower cost space travel, and then we can start to have really a dynamic entrepreneurial explosion in space. You can't really have much entrepreneurial activity in space today because just the basic price of admission is too expensive. I mean, just to do anything, even something relatively small in space, is still very, very expensive. We need to lower the cost of admission so that thousands of entrepreneurs can have companies in space, kind of like what we've seen on the internet. Right now, you can't be 2 kids in a dorm room can make Facebook, but they can't make a space company. It's not practical. I want to make that practical.
Gotcha. So, that leads me to think about some of the conversations we've had. This is another view of those mountains in West Texas. Sitting around that fire pit. Some of the most profound conversations for me, anyway, that we've had are around the topic of long-term thinking. Yeah. Which is something that you've really embraced and you've brought to the businesses that you run. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about. I don't think that most people who are running businesses or who are even starting a company like Blue Origin allow themselves to think in centuries, even for visions, for a vision of what they're creating. Or at Amazon, I know that you've said 5 to 7 year timeframes for experiments that you're running. Talk to me about long-term thinking and your point of view on.
Well, long-term thinking is a lever. It lets you do things that you could not do or couldn't even conceive of doing if you were thinking short-term. So if that's why I have a project where I'm helping a group of people build a 10,000 year clock. It ticks once a year and dongs once a century, and the cuckoo comes out once a millennium. It's a big 500-foot tall thing inside a mountain right here,
inside one of those
in this mountain range. And the 10,000 year clock is a symbol. I don't think it'll do anything for the first few hundred years. But after a few hundred years, once it's old, people start to pay attention to older symbols. And so a few hundred years from now, I hope that people will think about that as a symbol for long-term thinking. If I collaborated with somebody here in this audience and I said, look, I want you to solve world hunger, and I want you to do it in 5 years, you would properly reject the opportunity. You would say, look, it's not possible, it's not practical. But if I said, look, I want you to solve world hunger in 100 years, that's a job you'd take because it's a much more addressable problem. You can first create the conditions. You have time to create the conditions where then you can solve the problem. And so that's a very important way of thinking. And I find it works with everything. I mean, you have to back up and find the right time horizon for what you're trying to do. But at Amazon, we probably do most of our things we expect to get some results in sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But we find a lot of our other companies that compete against us in various ways, they're often trying to get things done in 2 or 3 years. And so we can do things that if everything has to work in 2 to 3 years, then that limits what you can do. If you give yourself the breathing room to say, okay, I'm okay if it takes 7 years, all of a sudden you have way more opportunities.
One of the things I wanted to shift to here is when when we are raising a glass around the fire, and you usually have a toast.
A standard toast.
A standard toast that you usually kick off the night with.
Yeah.
And it's
to adventure and fellowship.
To adventure and fellowship. And literally that's like the toast that he kicks off just about every dinner with, right? Every dinner, every night. And it's, it's interesting to me because I know that you are somebody who pays attention to the words that you use, right? You're careful about the words that you use. And those seem like very specific words. So I was wondering if we could just talk a little bit about why adventure and why fellowship. And as I was thinking about this, it occurred to me that you've been taking some adventures throughout your whole life. Here
That's
you
our
are.
grandmother, Nanny.
Yeah, that's Nanny. And when you were a kid, you used to take road trips with Nanny and
We did the
Pop.
Wally Byron Caravan Club road trips, 300 Airstream trailers.
Here.
All driving down the highway together. We'd park
This was
in
before
these
they were hipster cool.
big wagon wheel formations. Yeah, there was no avocado toast at this time.
And you and I had the fun opportunity. We drove across the country.
In the Defender. That was an amazing trip.
That was a very fun trip. And then we also we spent 3 days on horseback.
That was a 50-mile ride in West Texas, 3 days. Super fun. My butt hurt.
Yeah. I apologize about the quality. Like I said, this is not what I do, so this is the best I can do here. But I did take this picture. That's Jeff sleeping on that trail ride.
It was cold. This is that ring of, you can see how I'm keeping that pillow from, this is when you know it's really good to be a mammal.
Provide your own heat.
Provide your own body heat. Keep the frost away from your face.
I guess all of these adventures. This is you're dropping down into a cave.
Yeah, that's me rappelling down. That was really fun. You were on that trip.
I was on that trip too. But people have asked me this, because they know that we go on a lot of adventures together, and they're a bit incredulous when I answer the question. But they ask me, is he on his
So those are the areas where we get really excited, and right now that's probably the limits of what we can do right now in humans.
Okay, great. Well, that sounds significant. What about epigenetic engineering? That's another thing.
That is exactly what I want to do and what I would love to be known for. But ultimately, notoriety.
Hey, everyone. So, Reed, thank you so much for joining us today.
My absolute pleasure, Connie. And I want to echo that congratulations to you as you assume this great new role as editor-in-chief.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet of you to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So, Reed, you have one of the most famous last names in Silicon Valley. People don't know you yet. What would you like for them to know about you?
Oh, that's such a nice question. All I really care about in this world is making a huge difference for cancer patients. And what we really do at Yosemite and what I've wanted to do my entire life is to make cancer non-lethal in our lifetimes. If we can be a part of that, that is exactly what I want to do and what I would love to be known for. But ultimately, notoriety is really low on my list of priorities. What I really care about the most is being involved with amazing science, but especially making great companies and translating those into patients as soon as possible, because patients are the ultimate arbiters for how well we're doing. So patient difference is really what we're at.
And so you have a specific plan to do that. So you took the wraps off of a venture fund last month, I guess, last month, a $200 million venture fund, and you run alongside it a donor advised fund. So tell me a little bit about what you have cooking there.
So it's a structure that we actually have pioneered at Yosemite. So it's pretty unusual, and it's something that I'd love to get an opportunity to talk about because it's something that we're very excited to debut, but also something that we hope other people will eventually copy. So the way that it works is our venture fund is a very traditional venture fund with one big exception, and that is that there's a percentage of the fund, it's small, it's only 2.5%, that goes into a donor advised fund, which is a type of nonprofit entity that one doesn't own, but that they can still direct. That capital is then earmarked for grants, which is far more akin to seed funding in the biotech ecosystem than it would be philanthropy in other areas. And the reason why we're doing this is we've really piloted this at Emerson, and through partnering with the best researchers in the world on their best projects, we then can not only de-risk science that we then turn into companies, but we also get a network of the best KOLs in the world. And we've done this long enough that we've been lucky to support about 500 labs so far and have a really big footprint across the academic ecosystem. Those are connections and insights that we're going to be able to take with us as we make our investment decisions too. I want to pause though and just mention the way that we've structured this means that we have absolutely no IP or royalty rights to any of the grants that we do. I like to keep things really simple and really easy. And for me, that really means when we do a venture investment, we have to look at it on its merits of profitability and scalability. But when we do grants, we don't take any IP strings and we just do it as a pure philanthropic gift.
That's great. And I'm just curious, when you're dealing with donor advised funds, do the donors have any say in how the San Francisco Bay Area has obviously gotten a lot of grief. I'm just wondering, do you want to sort of tell us why you think people have it wrong?
Well, I am likely the most biased person you're ever going to talk to because I was born in Palo Alto, I went to Stanford, and I very proudly have lived in San Francisco for the last 9 years. I think Bay Area is the most beautiful place in the world, and it will always be home. The Bay Area, if you look historically, has been a lot like a phoenix. It has had booms and busts that have been extremely volatile all throughout its history. And every time there's a bit of a downturn, there's always a lot of naysayers and this is the end, what we're thinking. And consistently that has been proved wrong. And already, I promise you already, there are companies, young companies that are very excited to be here, talent that doesn't want to look anywhere else, and capital. And you mentioned AI earlier. AI is not happening in other parts of the country.
Great.
It's happening here in San Francisco.
Yeah. No, it's exciting, and you can just see the energy. I mean, obviously at this show, but elsewhere, I mean, the restaurants are buzzing, people are out on the streets, and it feels like the city has really come back. I mean, obviously, we have problems to overcome, but...
That's exactly right. Well, I see we're at time. I actually just want to end by thanking you for putting on such a wonderful inaugural event.
Oh, thanks. It's amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you all.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, David.
So those are the areas where we get really excited, and right now that's probably the limits of what we can do right now in humans.
Okay, great. Well, that sounds significant. What about epigenetic engineering? That's another thing that came up in our call, and I was like,
I promise you already, there are companies, young companies that are very excited to be here, talent that doesn't want to look anywhere else, and capital. And you mentioned AI earlier. AI is not happening in other parts of the country.
Right.
It's happening here in San Francisco.
yeah. No, it's exciting, and you can just see the energy. I mean, obviously at this show, but elsewhere, I mean, the restaurants are buzzing, people are out on the streets, and it feels like the city has really come back. I mean, obviously we have problems to overcome, but...
That's exactly right. Well, I see we're at time. I actually just want to end by thanking you for putting on such a wonderful inaugural event.
Oh, thanks. It's amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you all.
Hey everybody, I'll some selfies on stage. Okay, that's fine. Am I in it? Okay, now I'm in it. Don't everyone do that. Great talk with Shaq. That's like I think the only guest that I played as in NBA Jam probably that we've had. So that's something. All right, but next up, stick around. Great chat coming up. Great discussion we have with our very own brand new editor-in-chief, Connie Loizos, and she's going to be talking to a guest who has a very famous father, but also he is making news in his own right with a new $200 million venture fund specifically looking to invest in tech to help fight cancer. So he apparently never thought that he would be a VC, wanted to be a doctor, and ended up doing this instead, and we'll hear why he took this path. So let's welcome up Connie and Reed Jobs.
Hey, everyone. So, Reed, thank you so much for joining us today.
My absolute pleasure, Connie. And I want to echo that congratulations to you as you assume this great new role as editor-in-chief.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet of you to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So, Reed, you have one of the most famous last names in Silicon Valley. People don't. Know you yet. What would you like for them to know about you?
Oh, that's such a nice question. All I really care about in this world is making a huge difference for
FCC regulations, right?
Max Levchin at the FBI come to his house for cracking game
I've never
codes.
had that, but I'll call you if it happens after. I hung this antenna outside of our dorm room, and I just started a radio station with a transmitter, and it was me and a couple friends. And this is one example of, I think, a lot of different things I did in high school and in college, that it was just starting things. It was having ideas and wanting to make things happen, and not really having that part of your brain that tells you not to do something because either it's illegal or like it's not the right thing to do. And you just do it anyway because you're having fun and because you want to start something that people love. And that carried through, I think, into college, where I would start little websites on the side and have people, like one of them was called Swap, and it was Craigslist, but for colleges. And I think the idea has been done like 40 times, all unsuccessfully. But that's actually how I met Mark Zuckerberg and those folks initially, because they were doing stuff out in Palo Alto, and I was working. It's the ability for anyone with any background to like actually do big things, and that if anything, it's you that's holding yourself back from doing that. I think that fear or like lack of confidence or fear of embarrassment or whatever, like, is the one thing that keeps people from doing like the biggest things in the world, like starting a huge company or being the star of a movie. When people have passions, I think they hold themselves back from them because of the fear. And I think a lot of people are just like, oh well, they're just not that talented, or they're not like, and I actually truly believe any person here could create the next Instagram or the next Google, or I don't even want to put myself in that class. I actually think like the next Google or the next Facebook or the next whatever. And it's really like people that I think hold themselves back. And I think the way around that is by letting yourself be a little crazy. And yeah, I'd say not a lot of people believe that.
Okay. And if you could have one mediocre superpower in the world, what would it
He
be?
definitely didn't tell me the right questions now.
Did he just make them
up? Totally misled me.
He's now become my favorite person. That you thought you were prepared.
Wow.
You were not. Would you like examples of mediocre superpowers?
No, I can do this.
Would you
How about?
like to know what Dennis's was?
Yes.
He wanted to be able to, you know how on your TiVo you can like, boop, 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 like go back just 5 seconds? He wanted to be able to do that 5 times in his daily life.
That would be really useful, actually. I want to be able to fly
That's not mediocre.
for 15 feet increments, like the dodo bird or whatever. Like I want. Be able to like just like kind of jump a little bit. I think that would be so funny. I'd be like, look, I can. Oh.
Of all the things you can have, like, this is the least practical answer I've ever gotten out of someone in Silicon Valley. Like, Reid Hoffman was like, I want to type twice as fast. Most people are like, I want to be perfect. Caffeinated.
That's not a mediocre superpower though. Superpower is like you think this guy's gonna like totally kill it and he lands 15 feet from there. I'm like the Wright brothers of superpowers.
But the Wright brothers did it.
Yeah, but for
You're
like
the
20
other
feet or
guys.
whatever.
I got
a laugh.
You want embarrassment. Does that serve a practical purpose? Like, are you frequently 15 feet away from something and flying right now?
It's been wonderful, thank you. No, not a practical purpose. I just thought it was funny.
I like that. You are literally the first impractical superpower we've had in the Valley.
I mean, honestly, if you guys were gonna have a superpower, wouldn't you make it completely impractical? Like, why not? You're like, check this trick out. That's what I would do.
You know what mine would be now that I'm pregnant again? I could just snap my fingers and not have to pee. There we go. 2 hours on stage.
I did it
I'm
too,
fine
see?
now.
Thank you so much.
This
This
has
is a
been
lot
really
of fun. Yeah.
Huge round of applause for Kevin Sister. Let's talk about the beginning of Instagram, because you guys were kind of a company that came out of nowhere and was a fanboy favorite, and then sort of really started looking legit, and then the next thing we knew, you were bought. You didn't have as long of a time in the public eye as a lot of companies that wind up as big. So I want to share a little bit about the early days with everyone. I guess first of all, tell us some about you. Were you one of these guys who grew up always wanting to be an entrepreneur? Do your parents find it strange, the journey your life has taken?
No, in fact, like looking back on it, I actually think that our history makes complete sense, 100% complete sense. Not the speed with which it happened, but rather what we worked on, the people we worked with, and in what order, frankly. So as a kid, I was the guy in 4th grade who wanted to start companies in my classroom, and I was charging people for candy out of our lockers, and I won't say that I was a natural entrepreneur. I think I was actually pretty bad at that. Like, people didn't really buy the candy, and like they were like, "Why are you doing this?"
There's a candy machine right there.
Yeah, like buy some candy out of my locker. They're like, "Who's this Phoebe guy?" But honestly, you know, growing up, I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, or outside of. I went to this small little private school in Concord, and I mean, I guess an example is I decided I love music and I love DJing, and I decided I wanted to start a radio station. So I got an alumni to donate some money to buy an antenna that I hung out, you know, the window of my. I'm probably gonna get in trouble for saying this, but hung out.
Most good entrepreneurs have broken the law.
Right. But this is like openly admitting to FCC regulations, right?
Max Selection at the FBI come to his house for cracking
I've never had that, but I'll call you if it happens after. I hung this antenna outside of our dorm room, and I would just, you know, started a radio station with a transmitter, and it was me and a couple friends, and this is one example, I think a lot of different things I did in high school and in college, that it was just starting things. It was having ideas and wanting to make things happen and not really having that part of your brain that tells you not to do something because either it's illegal or like it's not the right thing to do. And you just do it anyway because you're having fun and because you want to start something that people love. And that carried through, I think, into college where I would start little websites on the side and have people, like one of them was called Swap, and it was Craigslist, but for colleges. And I think the idea has been done like 40 times, all unsuccessfully. But that's actually how I met Mark Zuckerberg and those folks initially because they were doing stuff out in Palo Alto and I was working on the site. I guess it's just an example of me like loving to start things and never really having the attention span to follow through on it. So I guess it's kind of fitting that this took such a short time. But
you might have lost interest
I might have
right
lost
before
interest,
Mark called. Wait, how did you meet him? Was there a convention of dorm room founders? How did that happen?
It's really weird. The history, like between our company and Facebook, it goes back probably 7-ish years or so. And basically, at Stanford, they had moved out, and I remember hearing about this thing Facebook, and I signed up for it, and everyone was obsessed, and they were like trying to get the most friends. And then a couple months later, it was like, oh, I think the guys that started that are in the fraternity house right now, like they're walking around. So I was in a small fraternity at Stanford, not the cool one, and I won't say which one, but it was the one where we like to study a little bit more and
build websites on the side.
Build websites on the side, the super cool stuff. And I don't know, it was a lot of fun. But they came, and I remember walking into a room, and Mark was sitting talking to one of my friends, Mike, and that's how we met initially, and we got to talk about the websites that I was working on, and he was like, oh, I have this thing called Facebook, you should come check it out. And that's where the relationship started. I mean, you guys chuckle, but Facebook back then, like I don't know how many people in the room are like were in college when Facebook launched, but it was literally just Facebook, like the website, and it wasn't this thing that everyone knew about. And I remember telling my friends, oh, like they're looking for interns for the summer, and they're like, it's a fad. And I had mentors over the summer tell me, oh no, it's a fad, it'll be gone in a year, like get a real job. And I know everyone's laughing now, right?
Well, but this is the thing that's crazy about the Valley is like everyone rewrites these things like it was always successful. We always knew it. It was this overnight success. When I first started covering Facebook, people were passing on that thing left and right. They were like, this is the next Friendster. It will never go anywhere. I mean, it was actually, you could count on one hand the people in the Valley who were bullish on it at that point.
I mean, that's one of the things I think is most interesting about Silicon Valley in general is just how hard it is to predict what is going to be the next Google, Facebook, Apple, whatever. And how, in hindsight, it all seems so clear, but when you're pitching an idea, how many people look at you like you're crazy? When I told people I wanted to work on a photos website, I remember the looks on their faces being like, you left your job at Google to do what? And like, why would you work on photos? Photos is this thing that's been covered by Flickr, Facebook does it now. And like, why would you work on photos? And it's hard, I think, in the moment to have the wherewithal to actually push through and like say, I believe in this. But I didn't really have a choice because I quit my job. I wanted to do something. And frankly, like we had to do something. And photos, in retrospect, I was talking a little bit about my youth. Like photos was the one thing that I did all the time. I took photos. I had a bunch of different cameras. I was obsessed with lenses. I took darkroom classes. And in retrospect, I think it makes a lot of sense that we did the company that we did. But at the starting point, I think we were just searching for an idea, and we were, searching for that thing that would become the next Facebook. And it was hard to do.
So, what was your impression of Mark when you first met him? To go back to that.
Like I don't.
And yeah, back then, the ethics around faking weren't quite the same. Anyway, so he had that big joke in the deal, obviously.
Can you sort of just speak to how the experience was? Was it retrospectively, was it the good way to do it, a bad way to do it? How would you have done it different, or would you do it the same? It's something everybody here struggles with. Or a lot of people struggle with.
I mean, I think it turned out pretty well.
So I think that's really good. I think and Eric's a great leader, and I think we learned tremendous amount from him. And I think we ran pretty effectively also as the team for a long time on those things. So I think these are very personal decisions, and I think there's probably no right answer. I think if you have a really long time period, obviously, I think you can probably learn the things you need to know about management or not. I mean, like I said, it's a personal decision. I think running a company, startup is really a big commitment. Takes a lot out of you, out of your life to do well, I think. I'm sure the same is true for companies as they get bigger. So I'm not sure that's for everyone. Some people are good at starting things, not good at finishing things. And I think organizations have trouble recognizing that too. I think, and those are difficult transitions for people. In general, I think if you have a project or a company and it can have stable leadership, over 20 years, that's better than not.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's been a treat to have both of you here. And really appreciate the time to have you two drive here, or in Sergey's case, to typeboat here.
You didn't quite make it. I only made it halfway, which is the worst distance to actually make it. But I turned around and went back. There wasn't wind on this side of the bridge.
Well, thank you. I hate it when people say somebody needs no introduction, then goes on to introduce them. But I do want to start in the realm of what might have been. A few years ago, I think 1997, Larry and Sergey almost got acquired. Can you tell us a little bit about this? And I always wonder how the world might be different if that had in fact happened.
We had developed this technology we called PageRank, sadly not BrinRank, but anyway, we probably would have sold better that way. But we developed this technology that we found was useful for search. It by itself it wasn't really a complete search engine, but we had kind of just search titles of web pages and ranked them quite well. But we showed it to a bunch of the existing search companies back then. Some of you might remember them, InfoSeek, Excite, Lycos, and probably the greatest interest came from Excite, and actually came from Vinod. You were the investor in Excite, and we spent a while talking to them, and talking to you, Vinod.
Yep.
You remember that. In the end, I don't think the management team there was quite as excited about it, no pun intended. But I remember there were 4 of us at the time, 4 grad students at Stanford, and I remember we fired off a note to Vinod. It was just like a little email. We said we don't really want to sell, but okay, for $1.6 million, you got a deal. And a few minutes later, we got a reply that said, "That's a lot of dough, but okay, we'll do it." I know, it's characteristic of Nadella. So then, 10 minutes later, Scott, one of the 4 of us, comes running in, laughing, huge grin on his face. He had faked the reply. And yeah, back then, the ethics around faking it weren't quite the same. Anyway, so he had that big joke, and the deal obviously never came to fruition, and we went our own way to build search.
So the way I remember it, we actually agreed on a deal around $350,000.
What? Are you trying to renegotiate this now?
But I had a hard time getting the management team to agree that they should acquire Google.
I think he's saying that they were having a hard time going to 350 and we were having a hard time changing our number.
Yeah, they felt they didn't need it. But I start here for one very simple reason. There are many, many instances where things could have gone either way. And I'm really glad they didn't acquire, because the world might have been a very, very different place. Looking back in retrospect, I feel like it would have been really, really sad if, in fact, Larry and Sergey had sold the company and not pursued the vision and changed the world the way they have. So
it's actually kind of an interesting story, because the reason we didn't sell it is not so much the money. I mean, I don't know, we're grad students, eating burritos or whatever. So $1 million was a fair amount. The reason I think we really didn't sell the company was that we talked all this search companies at the time, and they just weren't interested in what we were doing. And so, and it was obviously didn't want to buy this company that didn't really have anything without the people. So they wanted us, but we were well, we're going to work at this place that doesn't believe in search. Yeah, that's not going to cause anything good to happen. So ultimately we didn't sell for that reason, just they weren't interested in it, which is the same reason they had trouble getting to $1 million, which I guess at the time was a lot of money. But I think ultimately for me it was just about wanting to actually search seemed pretty important. It was about actually wanting to do something in that area, and it didn't seem like that was going to happen in these organizations.
Yeah, it's amazing when the business people take over how rational they get, focused on short-term revenue and lose long vision. That's a good place to kick off on a different point. Most companies end up in failure, and I'm not talking about just the startups, but if you look at the S&P 500, so many of the very large companies keep going out of business at an increasing rate. People are surprised. What do companies need to do, whether they're small or large, to address these challenges? How do they take a different path, and how is Google taking a different path?
Well, I do think when I talk to most companies, I do think their leaders are pretty short-term focused. And I was giving people the question, imagine you're running Exxon. What do you do? So you want to do something good. It's one of the most valuable company on earth. lot of people think probably it's not doing good things, like worried about the environment and so on. But the company has that company has a lot of capabilities. Has worldwide operations, manufacturing, government relations. Probably could do a lot of different things. If you took a 20-year view, if you took a 4-year view, it's pretty hard question to answer. What do you do in the next 4 years? Which I think is about the average tenure of a Fortune 500 CEO. So if you're being measured quarterly, obviously it's good to have some pressure. To actually do things and make money and improve things. But I think the 4-year kind of horizon for the leaders is pretty difficult. It's pretty difficult to solve big problems in 4 years. I think it's probably pretty easy to do it in 20 years. So I think our whole system is kind of set up in a way that makes it difficult for leaders of really big companies. Eventually what you're doing kind of doesn't make sense over time for whatever reasons, environmental or social or whatever it is. And I think companies have a big problem making a big transition, so they get replaced.
So I'd love both of you to comment a little bit on where Google is. What are the couple of things that become really, really critical for Google to do in the next 5 to 15 years? What areas are going to be critical?
I think if there were a couple areas that were critical, then that would be too vulnerable a spot to be in a way. I mean, there are many opportunities to broadly use technology to impact the world and to have a successful business, and we try to invest in at least in the places where we see good fit to our company. But that could be many bets, and only a few of them need to pay off. I guess from my perspective, running Google X, that's kind of my job is to invest in a number of opportunities, each one of which may be a big bet. But I hope, well, I guess you have a portfolio too. But I hope across that portfolio, some of them pay off, and some of them are connected to our existing business, and some not so much. And if you look at the self-driving cars, for example, I hope that could really transform transportation around the world and reduce the need for individual car ownership, the need for parking, road congestion, and so forth. So if that was successful in its own right, I'd be super happy. It's obviously still a big bet. It's got many technical and policy risks. But if you are willing to make a number of bets like that, you got to hope that some of them will pay off.
Larry, any particular areas you think are critical to Google's success the next few years? Areas you don't want to screw up in?
I mean, I think we're pretty excited about Android. Android, obviously. I think that you have our traditional purchases, obviously search and things like that. I think one of the things people have been confused about, people are like, what is Google? Why are you guys coherent? And it's really interesting when you look at search, just really trying to understand everything in the world, make sense of it, organize it for people. We kind of say, well, we're doing that, and a lot of queries are actually about places, so we need to understand places. And then we say, well, a lot of queries are, about content we can't find, we do books, and so on. So we've kind of been gradually expanding that. And if you look at things like Google Now, also, actually, well, maybe you don't want to ask a question, maybe you want to just have an answer for you before you ask it. That would be better. Originally the I'm feeling lucky button, I was supposed to be, you should be able to skip the search results and go directly to the answer. Unfortunately, it didn't work that well. It was kind of an obtuse naming of the feature, but that was the same kind of idea. And I guess we feel like right now the computers are still pretty bad. You're just messing around, you're kind of scrolling on your touch screen phone and trying to find, you're in a car and it's bouncy and it doesn't really work. And so I think the actual amount of kind of knowledge you get out of your computer versus the amount of time you spend is still pretty bad. And so I think our job is to kind of solve that. And most of the things we're doing make sense in that context.
So along those lines, one of the areas I know you've both been very interested in machine learning and AI, as it's been called in the past. And in the past, it's never quite reached its potential or speculated potential. How far do you think it is as a technology, and how much of a role do you think it plays going forward?
Well, look, this is our latest model right here. See, not perfect yet, but doing pretty well. So in the machine learning realm, we have several kinds of efforts going on. For example, the Brin project, which is really machine learning focused, and it takes inputs such as vision, and in fact, we've been using it for the self-driving cars. It's been helpful there. It's been helpful for a number of Google services. And then there's sort of more general intelligence, like the DeepMind acquisition that, in theory, we hope will one day be fully reasoning AI. Those are obviously computer scientists have been promising that for decades and not at all delivered. So I think it would be foolish for us to make prognoses about that. But we do have lots of proof points that one can create intelligent things in the world, because all of us are around, and therefore you should presume that someday we will be able to make machines that can reason and think and do things better than we can.
So in this group is a bunch of people who are addressing the beginnings of the machine learning revolution. There's people replacing farm workers so you can read plants and provide plant-by-plant care. People who are doing machines to make hamburgers automatically, all the way up the chain to people replacing law clerks legal clerks, or even doctors, the psychiatrists, the ENT specialists, you name it. So the whole span from very simple work to very large work is being replaced in a way that is a little bit scary. And I want to come back before we finish to the social aspects of some of the technology changes. But I do wonder if the vast majority of jobs that we know today, like more than 50%, might be replaced by machines that can do that human judgment piece better.
Well, we've been working on the venture investment machine learning. No, I'm just kidding.
It's kind of true, actually.
As long as I can buy one, I'm good.
That is kind of what Google Ventures does, though.
They started that way. I don't know if they're actually doing that. Like, I know they keep hiring partners for whatever reason. So I don't know. They might not be working so well on the algorithm project.
In fact, one of the early Excite employees, Graham Spencer, was working on this project at Google now.
Yes, ironic.
Maybe they just sit around and have parties. Maybe they are using the algorithm. I don't know what goes on in the ventures thing. But I do think that yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that people do have been over the past century replaced by machines and will continue to be.
90% of people used to be farmers, though.
Yeah, no, it's
so
like
happened before. Not surprising.
Yeah, the vast majority of employment shifted from farming to only needing about 2% of the U.S. workforce. That happened between 1900 and the year 2000. And I see the beginnings of that happening again with a rapid acceleration the next 10, 15, 20 years.
I mean, I totally believe we should be living in a time of abundance, like Peter Diamand's book. I think, like, if you really think about the things that you need to, like, make yourself happy, it's like housing, security, opportunity for your kids. I mean, anthropologists have identified these things. I mean, it's not that hard for us to provide those things. Like, I mean, the amount of resources we need to do that, the amount of work that actually needs to go into that, it's pretty small. I'm guessing less than 1%.
Yeah.
At the moment. So the idea that everyone needs to work frantically to meet people's needs is just not true. So I do think there's a problem that we kind of don't recognize that. And I think there's also like kind of a social problem that a lot of people aren't happy if they don't have anything to do. So we need to give people things to do. You need to feel like you're needed and wanted and have something productive to do. But I think the mix with that and the industries we actually need and so on there's not a good correspondence. That's why we're busy destroying the environment and other things maybe we don't need to be doing. So I'm pretty worried until we figure that out, we're not going to have a good outcome. One thing I was talking to Richard Branson about this, they have a huge problem there, they don't have enough jobs in the UK. So he's been trying to get people to hire 2 part-time people instead of 1 full-time. So at least the young people can have a half-time job rather than no job. And it's slightly greater cost for employers. I was thinking the extension of that is if you have kind of global unemployment or widespread unemployment, you just reduce work time. Everyone I've asked a lot of people about this, I say, maybe not you guys, but most people, if I ask them, like, would you like, an extra week of vacation? They raise their hands, 100% of people. 2 weeks or 4-day work week. Everyone will raise their hand. Most people like working, but they'd also like to have more time with their family or to do their own interests. So that'd be one way to deal with the problem is if you had a coordinated way to just reduce work week. And then if you had slightly less employment, you can adjust and people would still have jobs.
I'll quibble a little bit that I don't think in the near term the need for labor is going away. I mean, it gets shifted from one place to another, but people always want more stuff for more entertainment or more creativity or more something.
I think it's kind of an imperfect system, so there's no reason that it really will correspond. There's been some economics arguments that that's not as true now as it has been. But that could be to other kinds of governance problems and so on. But nobody really knows the answer to that question.
Yeah, but since we went into the social domain, there's short-term issues like we're seeing in San Francisco. People not appreciating that people who are part of the ideas economy in some way are doing much better than people who aren't.
San Francisco thing is really a governance problem because we're building lots of jobs, lots of office buildings, and no housing. And so it's not surprising that causes a lot of issues. And you also have a lot of people who are rent controlled, and so they don't participate in the economic increase in housing prices. It actually hurts them. It doesn't help them. So I think those problems are more structural and very serious problems. We're not really on path to fix those problems as a Bay Area.
Yeah, but there may be indicators that income distribution will get more lopsided over time.
Yeah, that's true. That's also a big issue.
Right. And I fundamentally believe we moved from an economy of labor and capital to an economy of ideas. And most economists haven't caught on to this change, that ideas are a disproportionately large part of the growth of the economy, which I won't go too deep in there, but it leads to some interesting questions, and the Republican-Democratic divide about taxes and income redistribution may become much more critical and much more intense. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. That seems to be... we don't have to go there if you...
No, I think ideally one would try to tax more the things that we don't want and either subsidize or encourage the things that we do want. So I think kinds of things people spend money on that are wasteful, you can imagine having higher taxes on, or things that are harmful like carbon, it could be taxed at a higher rate, and that would on the one hand presumably slow wasteful spending, but on the other hand perhaps we could encourage the kinds of investments that we want to be making.
Yeah, looking 40 years out, I find it hard to imagine why we won't need to support half the population to not work, but pursue other interests that are interesting to them. Suddenly X Games is an entertainment event instead of a sport. Anyway, let me go back to Google. We talked a little bit about self-driving cars. How large a change do you think that can cause to happen in society? Either one of you speculate on how large a change that might mean. It's more than just the software.
Yeah, I hope it can be a really dramatic change. Off the bat, of course, there's many people who currently cannot get around if they're too old, too young, disabled, and so forth. But that's still just a fraction of the population. I think the bigger changes can come to the community, the lifestyle, the land use. So much of our land in most cities, about 30 to 50% is parking, which is a tremendous waste, and also the roads themselves, which are both congested and take a lot of space and are just unpleasant. So with self-driving cars, you don't really need much in the way of parking because you don't need 1 car per person. They just come and get you when you need them, and you can also make much more efficient road use and this is not something we've developed yet, but it's certainly been simulated by many. They can form trains, they can go at high speeds, perhaps much higher than our highway speeds here. Fundamentally, they can just make much more efficient use of the space and therefore people's time. So I think that can be really transformative.
Yeah. Real quickly, and I love the car because it's such a radical transformation in economics. The way I look at it, a car is $300 a month to lease, a driver is $300 a day. A driverless car is a 97% cost reduction in the cost of a driven car, making it cheaper than a car you own, probably. So it completely changes economics. But the traditional auto companies aren't going to want a large reduction in the number of cars.
It depends if they have a 5-year view or a 20-year view.
Well, it also depends if they're the ones producing them. I mean, yes, any individual company might be happy as long as they're the ones making those cars.
So do you think Google gets into the business of making cars potentially? Not that I'm asking you to announce what you're doing, but speculate 10 years from now.
Well, I'm very excited about the technology that we're building, but it's still in its early stages. I think eventually, in the future, there might be multiple partners or companies that we work with. That, some of them can be manufacturers, and some might be service providers. This is all pretty speculative right now. I'm working hard to just get the basics of the technology working. But the ideal self-driven car is not one that's we've experimented where we convert the Lexuses and Priuses, but it's also really nice to not have a steering wheel, not have pedals. Maybe the seats should face each other, things like that. So it's not. I'm not sure that the traditional car designs are ideal for self-driving.
Let me go back to Larry. As CEO of Google, a lot of these guys have board members who keep saying focus on a few things. Self-driving cars is one. You've done some things in health and others. How do you decide what's focused and what's unfocused?
Yeah, my thinking about this has changed quite a bit over the years. I think the ISO is kind of stupid if you have this big company and you can only do like 5 things. And I think it's also not very good for the employees because then you have like 30,000 employees and they're all doing the same thing, which isn't very exciting for them. So I think ideally a company would scale the number of things it does with the number of people, kind of in a linear fashion. And as far as I can tell, that never happens. It's like logarithmic with the number of people, if that. And I'd always have this debate actually with Steve Jobs. He'd be like, "You guys are doing too much stuff," and I'd be like, "Yeah, that's true." And he was right. I mean, in some sense. But I think the answer to that, which I only kind of came to recently as we were talking about this stuff, is that if you're doing things that are highly interrelated, then there's some complexity limits. It's all going to escalate to the CEO or something because you have things that are unrelated. They're going to at some point they have to get integrated. So a lot of our internet stuff is like that. I mean, user experience needs to make sense. It needs to feel like you're using Google, not that you're using something else. And so I think there is a limit to kind of how much we can do there, and we have to think carefully about it. The great thing about the automated cars is like Sergey can do that, and I don't have to talk to him. I like talking to him, but I don't really have to talk to him about that because there's almost zero impact on the rest of our business. Although it does use some great engineers we have, mapping and other things, naturally move to that project. But that's a scalable process. I don't have to talk to those engineers; they just move magically. So I do think companies usually try to do very adjacent things. They figure, we're going to know exactly how to do something that's very similar to what we already do. And the problem with that is that causes a management burden. Whereas if you did something a little less related, you can actually handle more things.
Yeah. I should note, for Google X, I created a set of rules for our projects that, by design, keep us farther away from Google. For example, we focus on atoms, not bits. I mean, what we do involves a lot of software, but it always has a key non-software component, like obviously the cars, even though we have a lot of software. And,
balloons.
The balloons, yes, the internet project balloon. We have internet via balloon, high-altitude balloons. We have the kite-based power, the flying wind turbines, and all these things are pretty physical, and that's by design. In fact, when I focused on Google X, I shifted out a few projects which seemed closer to Google's core.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say for startups, maybe, you need to get one thing done well, or else you don't have permission to do anything else.
Yeah.
But for big companies, I think it's a little different.
Mm-hmm. That leads to another strategy question, and I want to get off this, and I'm going to go a little bit long since we have both Larry and Sergey.
Its population with immigration, because if China is currently tracking to be maybe lose 40% of its population every generation, that would be 700 million, 800 million people, or roughly 700 million people. It's a lot, basically. You'd have to have the entire United States immigrate there twice every generation to simply maintain numbers, just for China. So immigration, there simply aren't enough numbers in immigration. And I think there is value to a culture. We don't want cultures. We don't want Japan to disappear. We don't want Italy as a culture to disappear. We don't want France as a culture to disappear. I think we have to maintain the sort of reasonable cultural identity of the various countries, or they simply will not be those countries. Italy is the people of Italy. The buildings are there, but really, what is Italy? Italy is the people of Italy. So, I mean, I just think and I speak as someone who is very much an environmentalist. I believe in building a sustainable future for the world. I think that there are very few people who, as an individual, who've done more than I have to help the environment with electric cars and solar and batteries to create a sustainable energy future, because we absolutely need a sustainable energy future. But there's an aspect of the environmental movement that I think has gone too far.
Really? Said from you?
Yes. So said from me, I think I am objectively one of the world's leading environmentalists in terms of doing things.
I don't say so.
Like, I'm an environmentalist who does things. I'm of action, not talk. I act. So I feel like I can say, as an environmentalist, that the environmentalist movement has gone too far. And in that, in the natural extension of the environmentalist movement, if you go too far, you start to look at humanity as a bad thing. You start to look at humanity as though we are a plague on the surface of the earth, as though humanity is a bad thing. And in fact, there are some people who think and say explicitly that, in fact, there was on the front page of the New York Times, there was a guy who said there are 8 billion people on earth. It would be better if there were none, which is crazy.
Definitely. So, you told me a joke about that. You told me once a joke about the cows and the problem with the cows. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, don't worry about the cows. The cows are fine. Cows are not going to destroy the environment. Cows are fine. Yes.
We have a lot of laws, European laws against all the people who work with them. It's a big issue for us. It seems to be a green issue, but it's a very industrial issue for us.
Yeah, I think farming and cows do not have any meaningful effect on the environment.
Yes, underline, please.
Yes, objectively, this is true. So if you say, like, there's really only one thing that matters from an environmental standpoint for carbon, which is that we are taking billions, eventually trillions of tons of carbon from very deep under the earth and transferring it to the atmosphere and oceans. That's actually really all that matters, is taking vast amounts of carbon from underground where it's buried and moving it into the atmosphere by burning it. And if you do that for long enough, eventually you will get climate change. Now, I think the climate change alarm is somewhat overblown in the short term. It's still a concern in the long term, but I think it's exaggerated in the short term.
Great.
Now, I have to try to thread the needle here between what is pragmatic and what is sensible, what really matters and what doesn't matter. What really matters is that over the long term, over the course of the next several decades, that we gradually reduce how many millions and billions of tons of carbon that we move from underground to the atmosphere, because we're running sort of a climate experiment that is dangerous. But I also don't think of it as a fundamental civilizational risk. It's not going to destroy life on Earth. It's not going to destroy humanity, but it will create hardship if you change the climate over many decades. So my message is, I think, much more pragmatic and I think correct and sensible. And I don't think we should demonize oil and gas. I think we should say, look, that is obviously necessary in the short term and the medium term too, and it'll take several decades to become sustainable. So I think if we just, without getting too worried about it, seek to have a sustainable energy future gradually, then that's what will happen. And so I think that some of the environmentalist movement is part of what is causing people to lose hope in the future. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we should have hope in the future. We should be excited about the future, and we should build the future we want.
What about, you call it the woke mind? Yes, it's the name you gave to that.
Yeah, woke mind virus.
The woke mind illness. What's that virus?
Yeah, so
it's coming to Europe. I have to advise you, huh?
Yes, well, this is not something you should import from America. Please don't import the woke mind virus. It's bad. So essentially, that to summarize maybe the woke mind virus, it consists of creating very divisive identity politics. So it actually amplifies woke mind virus, in my view, amplifies racism, amplifies, frankly, sexism, and all the isms. And while claiming to do the opposite, it actually divides people and makes them sort of hate each other, and it makes people hate themselves. And it's also anti-meritocratic. It's not merit-based. So you want to have people succeed based on how hard they work and the talents, not who they are, whether they're man, woman, what race, or gender. That stuff is all creating. It's an artificial mental civil war that is created, and it's not. And it's no fun. Okay, it is like woke mind virus and fun are incompatible. There's no fun in that. No joy. Woke mind virus is all about condemning people instead of celebrating people. Like when in the woke, it just doesn't celebrate. It's all about condemning and being divisive and being just. I think it's just evil, frankly. Really. Yeah, it's bad.
So bad.
Yeah.
But you get a lot of problems saying so on your social in X have this point of view. You are a good friend of Obama administration, and now they don't really like you so much for this kind of speech you do in public, or not?
I don't know. I mean, I'm very pro-human. I'm very pro-civilization. I'm in favor of humanity and our collective consciousness expanding on Earth and going beyond Earth and being a multi-planet species, a spacefaring civilization, and being out there among the stars and finding out the nature of the universe. Like all the things that seems like to me an exciting thing, something you can get really excited about. Is you can get excited. Like we want to have ideas that make you look forward to waking up in the morning, look forward to the day, look forward to the future. And so you have to say what excites you about the future. What moves your heart about the future? What makes you say like, yes, I'm glad about what will happen in the future. That's what we must focus on. And that's why we have to have a new generation. We've got to build, and we've got to grow. And like I said, we understand the nature of this beautiful universe that we find ourselves in, and the meaning of life, or even what questions to ask about the meaning of life. Let us explore this wondrous creation and have a good time doing it. That's my philosophy.
Let me go back for a little, because I want to ask you about your perception of Europe as a building, not as people. Because of Europe, you want a lot of integration of cultures, different cultures, and has different approach to immigration. We heard Meloni did a lot on that with Premier Rama in the first line of Albania. What do you think about this approach of Europe approach as building, I would say, as an established building?
Well, I should say, to be clear, on immigration overall, I'm very much in favor of legal immigration. I think that generally, one should welcome to a country anyone who is willing to work hard and is honest, has high integrity, and will add to any given country. If somebody is an asset to the country, why not have them join? That's obviously a great thing to do. So I think it's good actually to have an increase in legal immigration and a simple
legal with paper, with
just some approval process, but with a simple requirement that look, if somebody's going to add to a country, like we're just really hardworking and high integrity, let them in. I think that's great. But if it's illegal immigration and there's no filter, well, how do you know who's coming? You don't know. So you have to have some basis for saying somebody should come in or not come in. And my argument is like it should be a very simple basis. Will they add to the country? Will they be a productive part of the economy? And do they admire the culture? Do they want to join because of the culture? Then that's great. But if there's no process for that, then you don't know. I think at least some number of the people that come in will not be necessarily. And I want to be careful because my words will be misconstrued. I'm not saying all illegal immigrants are. I think probably perhaps most of them are good. But there will be some. If there's no process for reviewing that at all, then how can you say that everyone who is an illegal immigrant is going to be honest and hardworking? You can't say that. You simply don't know. So I want to be clear. Top line, pro-immigration, but let's increase legal immigration, but we should stop illegal immigration. I think this is just logical.
You have a lot of company.
So that's right.
You can drink because I want to do the list of the companies.
Yeah.
You have 5-7 minutes to do that. I mean, I'm joking with SpaceX, X, Neuralink.
So many X's.
All the X's.
Guess what my favorite letter is?
It's a good place to invest. Italy. It's a good place to invest some of, not your money, but some investment from your company, of the American companies, of the, I would say, competitive companies in this place. What's your opinion?
No, I think Italy is an incredible country, incredible culture. I love visiting. I love the Italian people. You guys are amazing. So I want the prosperity of Italy, and I want the prosperity of every country. I want the prosperity of humanity as a whole. And like I said, I want us to have an exciting future where we're fired up about what's going to happen and really excited. So, and I think Italy is a great place to invest. It's a great country. But I do want to emphasize that I do worry about the low growth rate. And if a company is to invest in Italy, they're like, well, you have to say, like, will there be enough people to work there? It's a simple question. If the workforce is declining, then who will work at the company? It's simple. If there's no people, there's no people to work.
Yeah, but I mean, in 50 years.
But I think it's even sooner than that, though.
You're so worried about that. Is the problem?
I feel like a total Cassandra here because I seem to be worried about it much more than other people. But there just needs to be people. If you don't make a new generation of people, there is no new generation of people. So that's it. I know I'm being repetitive here, but I'm just trying to state facts. So it's
a good place to invest.
I agree. It's a good place to invest. And a wonderful country. So please make more Italians is what I'm saying.
You said once that the internet is the system, is the I write down your word, the nervous system of humanity. What's it?
Yes.
You said once to me.
Okay, a long time ago,
artificial intelligence for you?
Sorry?
Artificial intelligence. If that is the nervous system, artificial intelligence, use another metaphor.
You're asking what do I think of artificial intelligence?
Obviously.
Well, you can think of artificial intelligence as, this is perhaps the biggest inflection point in intelligence since Homo sapiens. Yeah. Artificial intelligence will be essentially sort of a new species, or is a new species. So I think one of the biggest challenges, if I look at, say, civilizational risk, the risk to the future of humanity, birth rate is one of them. If we just don't have kids and dwindle away, that's one which I've talked a lot about. The other is, there's always like potentially nuclear war, of course, that kind of thing. Then AI is also an existential risk, and I think we need to be careful with the advent of AI. But it's very much a double-edged sword. You can think of AI as kind of like the magic genie, that like digital superintelligence will be capable of doing
anything,
pretty much anything.
But he doesn't have any consciousness. I'm wondering about that.
I mean, there's a whole question of like what is consciousness. In fact, so here's like I thought a lot about what is consciousness and where does consciousness arise. To say like because I think in terms of physics, and at least if physics is true, then we go from a start of the universe where things are almost entirely hydrogen, and then if you leave the hydrogen out long enough, eventually it coalesces into stars, and then those stars explode, and then they recondense. And so like most of the mass in your body was once at the center of a star, which is kind of wild, billions of years ago. And so where along the lines of hydrogen to human does consciousness arise?
You get very serious when you speak about that. Huh?
Yeah, no, it's a real question. If you leave hydrogen out in the sun long enough, it starts talking to itself. Here we are, hydrogen talking to itself.
How to deal with that? So if it is so important, how to deal? I mean, laws, personal behavior. How to deal with that artificial intelligence? It's a process. I mean,
I think we need to keep a close eye on artificial intelligence. I mean, I'm in favor of some regulatory insight, just so that someone can at least be a referee. Like if you think of any game, like there's always a referee for a game for industries that affect the good of the people, there are regulatory agencies that oversee those industries. Anything that's dangerous is overseen by some kind of referee or regulator. I think we should have the same thing for AI, just to help ensure that it is beneficial. The good part of AI is that we are headed for a future of abundance. So AI and robotics will mean that there are no shortage of goods and services. There will be goods and services. If you can think of it, you can have it, basically. So this is quite profound. Like I said, it's the magic genie. AI and robotics will get you anything you want. Now, usually in these sort of fairy tales about magic genies, it doesn't turn out so well. You have to be careful what you wish for, even if what you wish for are wishes. So it's just something we should be cautious about. Okay. On the plus side, it will bring many benefits. Like I said, it will usher in an age of abundance. So the positive scenario of AI is that there's an age of abundance and there are no shortage of goods and services, that any scarcity that exists will be only because we define it to be scarce. So, and it just seems to be somewhat of an inevitable thing, AI. So there's that, supposedly that Chinese saying about, may you live in interesting times. Well, I think we currently live in the most interesting of times in all of history right now. So, anyway, so my recommendation on AI is I think we want some kind of regulatory oversight just to make sure that it's beneficial AI.
Great, we hope so. And what about what the government's like? I mean, they are elected by people, like Meloni and this government and the other government. They have any risks, or what do you think about these challenges? For the executive of the nations about all these new process.
So I'm not trying to understand the question.
What's the risk for the government of these intelligence? Are there any risks? I mean, the democracy is finished.
Well, I think there's certainly a risk of artificial intelligence affecting voting opinion, I suppose, and manipulating public opinion. So I think there's some risk of, AI manipulating the public. I think there's some risk of that. So, yeah. Okay. But I think, like I said, 80% probable that AI is beneficial, 20% something like that.
I'm always worried because we have a new government, it's 2 years, it's going almost 2 years. And we have a Europe for us, it's our artificial intelligence. It seems like artificial intelligence, but it's not very intelligent sometimes, Europe. And so I'm wondering, what do you think about the government and about Europe? For us, it's so important, the relation. I understand artificial intelligence in the future, but in the present, we have
he on his phone the whole time?
What you're talking about. So he really actually was a very careful, conservative sort of person, not prone to crazy acts or anything, kind of introspective and even introverted, quiet person. But one day, he was all by himself, he had driven to the ranch, and he was at the main gate to the ranch, and he forgot to put the car in park. And so when he got to the gate, he noticed that the car was slowly rolling downhill toward the gate. He thought, this is fantastic. I have just enough time to unlatch the gate, throw the gate open, the car is going to drive right through, and this will be wonderful. He almost got the gate unlatched when the car hit the gate, and it caught his thumb between the gate and the fence post, and it stripped all the flesh off of his thumb. He was hanging there by a tiny little thread, and he was so angry at himself that he ripped that piece of flesh off and threw it in the brush, got back in the car, drove himself to the emergency room in Dilley, Texas, 16 miles away. And when he got there, they said, this is great, we can attach that. Where is it? And he said, oh, I threw it in the brush. They drove back with the nurses and everybody, and they looked for hours for the thumb, and they never found that piece of flesh, something probably eaten it. So they take him back to the emergency room, and they said, look, you have 2 choices. You're going to have a skin graft for that, and we can sew your thumb to your stomach and leave it there for 6 weeks. That's the best way to do it. Or we can just cut a piece of skin graft from your butt and just suture it on, and it won't ever be as good, but the advantage is your thumb won't be sewn to your stomach for 6 weeks. And he said, I'll take option 2, just do the skin graft from my butt. And he did that. It was very successful. It worked fine. But the funniest thing about this story is that I have incredibly vivid memories, and we all do, of him. Definitely his mornings were completely ritualized. He would wake up, eat breakfast cereal, read the newspaper, and shave with an electric razor for a really long time. Like, he would shave with that electric razor for like 15 minutes, and while he's eating his cereal. And when he was done shaving his face with that razor, then he would take 2 quick passes over his thumb, because his thumb grew butt hair. Which, by the way, did not bother him at all.
No. He was completely unfazed by it.
Unfazed.
So, thumb, butt hair aside, the value of resourcefulness, right, and self-reliance. How do you apply that to the work that you do on a daily basis? How do you?
Well, I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs and people pursuing dreams and passions in this kind. You always the whole point of moving things forward is you run into problems, you run into failures, things don't work. You have to back up and try again. Each one of those times when you have a setback and you back up and you try again, you're using resourcefulness, you're using self-reliance, you're trying to invent your way out of a box. And I have tons of examples at Amazon where we've had to do this. We failed so many times. I always think of us as a great place to fail because we're good at it. We have so much practice. And just to give you one example, many years ago now, we wanted a third-party selling business because we knew we could add selection to the store that way. And we started Amazon auctions. Nobody came. I think maybe our mother was the only one who purchased something.
I bought a coffee cup.
You bought a coffee cup? Okay, so there were 2 purchasers. And that's, then we said, well, we opened this thing called Z Shops, which was like fixed price auctions. Again, nobody came.
I didn't use that.
And then finally, and each one of these failures is like a year and a half long. And so we're trying to invent new things. And we finally came across this idea of putting the third-party selection on the same detail pages, the same product detail pages that we had our own inventory on, our own retail inventory on. We called this marketplace. And it started working right away. And so that resourcefulness of trying new things, figuring things out, what the customers really want, It pays off in everything. It pays off even in your daily lives. How do you help your children? What's the right thing? My wife has a great saying. We let our kids use, even now they're 17 through 12, but even when they were 4, we let them use sharp knives. And by the time they were, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8, we let them use certain power tools. And my wife, much to her credit, she has this great saying. She says, I would much rather have a kid with 9 fingers than a resourceless kid. And which I just think is a fantastic attitude about life.
Luckily, you have resourceful kids with 10 fingers each.
Yeah, so far they have all their fingers.
Yeah,
We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that resourcefulness is so important. You actually, it was a prerequisite for the selection of a spouse, right? So this is...
Yeah, I did in my 20s, this is, way, pre-Tinder, pre-Match.com. And so I had this, at a certain point I decided I wanted to get married, and I had all my friends setting me up, and I had my list of criteria. And this was like good old-fashioned blind dates. I went on dozens of blind dates. And it turned out I kept meeting people who were professional blind daters, and I sort of became a professional blind dater. And so we would sit down, and most of the conversation was quickly about how, yeah, we're not right for each other, but how do you meet people? And, it was actually turning over. But when I was telling my friends my criteria, one of the ones that I would list was that I wanted a woman who could get me out of a third world prison. And my friends were like, what are your future plans? Like, what? And I said, no, it's just a visualization for somebody really resourceful, because I think that you don't want to go through life with teammates who aren't resourceful. And so you do want to go through life with people who, if you need, could get you out of a third world prison.
Hypothetically speaking. Yeah. So, so this is a picture from...
That's a recent photo.
Yeah, that was last summer, I think. We took we were on a family vacation. And, so this one jumped out at me because, you're doing McKinsey curls there with your wife, and you're looking a little buff. And so that, of course, made me think of this. Now, as internet memes go, Swole Jeff is pretty cool, right? So, if Swole Mark raced across the internet, I'd be pretty psyched. But, this got sent to me by so many people, variations of this, right? Oh my God, your brother looks awesome, your brother looks awesome. I know. And then, but it confused me because, in all honesty, this is what I grew up with. Yeah. I'm just saying, right? So, when you guys saw Swole Jeff, I was like, I was surprised too, right? I mean, this is...
Yeah, sexy, right? I remember that. I am.
How old are you?
Halloween costume. I am one of. I had some friends and we went as the food.
Oh no, wait. There you go.
There we go. That is. Yeah. The chicks, lady killers. Chicks love that. They love that. We were very successful in high school.
So as fitness goes, and then there was this guy who's like late 90s Jeff, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And your eating habits at this point in your life were not great.
No, this is you won't even believe this story. You're just gonna have to believe me that I tell you this is true. When my wife and I got married, I had been eating a whole can for a couple of years. I had been eating for breakfast every morning a whole can of Pillsbury biscuits. So I would wake up in the morning, I would preheat the oven to 375, I would get out the baking sheet, I would crack open the Pillsbury biscuits, place them on there, and with butter, and I would eat the whole can. And I was skinny as a rail, and it was just, after watching me, so then we get married, and she watched me do this every morning as my spouse for like 3 months. And then she finally stopped me one day, and she said, do you know what's in that? And I was like, honestly, that wasn't even a concept for me, that there was something in food. That there was like I had never read a nutrition label in my life. I ate what tasted good to me. And so she kind of showed me the ingredients label, and we had a little very rudimentary discussion about nutrition, and I stopped eating the biscuits.
Well, I'm frankly very happy and somewhat surprised you survived all of that. We're glad you're still with us.
So she was incredulous. She couldn't believe it.
So one of the things I want to talk about, a question that we've talked about before, you were 30 years old in 1994 when you decided to start Amazon.com.
Mm-hmm.
You had a great job. I remember you had a great apartment on the Upper West Side.
I've been married for a year.
You've been married for a year.
I had not been eating biscuits for 9 months.
I'm just, how did you go through making the decision to drop what was a very good job and take this chance? It all seems very obvious now, right? This many years later that it paid off, but at the time it was not obvious.
No, it wasn't. And I did do a lot of soul searching. I went to my boss at the time, and I really liked my job. And I told my boss I was going to go do this thing, start an internet bookstore, and my wife, I'd already told my wife, and she's like, great, let's go. And I